Hey guys, tonight we are traveling back in time to Elizabethan England, but we're not heading to the royal court. Not at first. We're going somewhere far more interesting, more mysterious, and frankly, a bit strange. We're going to the home of a man who was, by any measure, a certified genius. He was a mathematician, a navigator, an astronomer, and a trusted advisor to the Queen herself. He was also, in his secret heart, a man who desperately wanted to talk to angels. This is a story about where the desire leads. And I'll give you a small warning if you were actually dropped into the 1580 seconds. The combination of plagues, political plots, and truly terrible sanitation means you might not last the first day, so it's much safer to experience it from here. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'd also love to see where you're re-listening from tonight. So drop your city and the current time in the comments below. It's always amazing to see how far these stories travel. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background home, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The air in London is thick. It's a soupy mix of wood smoke, damp river fog from the Thames, and the less than charming scent of several 100,000 people living in very close quarters. The sounds are a constant clatter iron-shod wheels on cobblestones, the cries of street vendors selling everything from hot pies to live eels, and the distant, rhythmic clang of a blacksmith's hammer. But you're leaving the chaos of the city behind, heading west along the river to the quieter, more respectable village of Mortlake. Pure, nestled amongst orchards and green fields, is a large, rambling timber and brick house. It doesn't look like a sorcerer's tower. There are no gargoyles, no strange lights pulsing from the windows. It looks like the home of a wealthy, important scholar, and that's exactly what drive John Dee is. As you step inside, the first thing that hits you isn't a whiff of sulfur or incense, but the smell of old paper, leather, and beeswax. You've just entered the single largest private library in all of England. This is our first major historical truth of the evening. John Dee's collection of books and manuscripts was legendary. He owned somewhere between 3,000 and 4,000 volumes, a collection far larger than the libraries at Oxford or Cambridge University at the time. This wasn't the library of a dabbler, it was the engine room of a Renaissance supergenius. You walk past shelves groaning under the weight of knowledge. Here are texts on mathematics, on optics, on chemistry. Over there, you see hand-drawn maps so detailed and accurate they would guide English ships across the Atlantic. In fact, it was Dee himself who advised sailors like Martin Frobisher on their voyages to the New World. And he even coined the term British Empire. He is a man at the absolute center of England's burgeoning global ambition. And he has the ear of the Queen. Elizabeth I trusts him. She calls him my Dee. Years ago, it was he who used his deep knowledge of astrology a practice, then considered a legitimate science to choose the most auspicious date for her coronation. She has visited this very house, seen this very library, and listened with rapt attention as he explained the wonders of the cosmos to the outside world. John Dee is the epitome of the Elizabethan man, brilliant, patriotic, and indispensable. But now, the sun has set, the house is quiet, and you follow him not to his study filled with maps, but to a smaller, more private chamber. The door is locked. Inside, the tools are different. There are no navigational astrolabus here. Instead, on a specially prepared table, sits a large, polished crystal sphere. Next to it is a strange, black mirror made of obsidian. A gift, it's said, from the Aztec people, brought to Europe by conquest authors. This is Dee's other laboratory, his true passion. For all his knowledge of the material world, Dee believes it is just a shadow of a higher, divine reality. He believes that God wrote the universe like a book, and that mathematics is its language, but he is tired of just reading. He wants to speak to the author's assistants. He wants to have a direct conversation with angels. And this is where you find him now, in a state of profound frustration. He has tried for years. He has prayed. He has fasted. He has followed the instructions in ancient, esoteric books. He has tried using different mediums, or SCRUs, to gaze into the crystal and report what they see. He is a little known, and rather sad, detail for a time. He even tried to use his own young son, also, as he described, hoping the innocence of a child could pierce the veil, but the results were inconsistent, childish, and ultimately disappointing. The heavens, for Dr. Day, remain stubbornly silent. He has all the knowledge of humanity on his shelves, but he can't get a clear signal from celestial customer service. He stares into the polished black surface of the obsidian mirror. It shows him only his own reflection, a man in his 50s, with a long, white beard that flows down his chest, and eyes filled with a deep, weary longing. He is a giant of his age, a pillar of the Elizabethan court. But in this room, he is just a man with a question that no book on his shelves can answer, and it is this deep, gnawing spiritual hunger that will soon lead him to open his door to a stranger, a man who claims he can make the angels talk. How much did the Queen know about this side of her trusted advisor? That's a question historians still argue about. Did she see it as a harmless eccentricity in an otherwise brilliant mind? Or was she, a woman of her time, secretly intrigued by the possibility herself? We may never know for sure. But what we do know is that Dee's world and his life are about to be turned upside down. You is standing there in the candlelight, a silent observer to this great man's private torment, to understand why John Dee, a man who could calculate the trajectory of a star, would be so fixated on talking to a ghost in a glass. You have to adjust your own thinking. You have to slip into the Elizabethan mindset. For Dee, and for many brilliant minds of his era, there wasn't a hard, bright line between science and magic. They were two sides of the same coin, two different languages for describing the same divine, intricate reality. Think of the universe as a vast, coded message written by God. Dee believed this with every fiber of his being. Mathematics, the field in which he was a master, was the grammar of this message. Astronomy was reading the punctuation, but he felt he was only ever scratching the surface. He wanted more. He was driven by a philosophy that was popular in intellectual circles at the time, a blend of Christian mysticism and ancient ideas called Neoplatonism and Hermeticism. The core idea was as above, so below, that everything in our world, from a simple flower to the complex movements of the planets, is a reflection of a higher, perfect, heavenly pattern. If you could just understand the pattern, you could understand God's mind. And what did he hope to achieve with this divine knowledge? His ambitions were anything but small. He wrote in his diaries that he hoped the angels would help him to heal the schism between Protestantism and Catholicism that was tearing Europe apart. He hoped they would reveal new, forgotten sciences that could cure disease and prolong life. And yes, like many of his contemporaries, he was deeply interested in alchemy, not just turning lead into gold, but in achieving a spiritual transformation, a purification of the soul. He wasn't just trying to get stock tips from the great beyond. He was trying to download a divine blueprint for saving the world. But here's a question that historians still debate endlessly. Was this quest purely for the spiritual salvation of mankind? Or was there a more practical, political angle? Remember, this is the Queen's advisor. England is a relatively new Protestant nation surrounded by powerful Catholic enemies, chiefly Spain. Was Dee's angel project a form of esoteric espionage? Was he hoping the angels might drop a hint about, say, the Spanish fleet's next move, or reveal the location of new lands rich with gold? Some scholars argue his angelic pursuits were a private crisis of faith, completely separate from his courtly duties. Others are convinced it was a secret project, a kind of metaphysical extension of the Queen's intelligence network. The truth is likely somewhere in the messy middle, a blend of personal piety and patriotic pragmatism. Whatever the motive, the method was failing miserably. You watch as he meticulously records another failure in his diary. HES tried so many SCR years before. Imagine the procession of hopefuls who have sat where you are now standing. There was Barnabas Saul, a man who was, by Dee's own account, a great sinner and a drunkard. He did gaze into the crystal and report scene. Well, mostly things that confirmed his own biases or were vague enough to mean anything. After a few sessions, Dee dismissed him, noting sorely that the spirits Barnabas was channeling were likely not of the holy variety. Then there were others, a string of them, men who would squint into the shining surfaces for hours, only to report a headache. Some would describe fantastic visions that, upon closer questioning, sounded suspiciously like things they'd read in popular books. It was a frustrating and expensive process, and this brings us to a slightly bizarre and very telling little fact about how Mandy. He firmly believed himself to be a descendant of the ancient Welsh princes, tracing his lineage all the way back to the legendary King Arthur. He didn't just see himself as an English scholar, he saw himself as the heir to a long line of Celtic mystics and kings, a keeper of ancient, magical British wisdom. This wasn't just a scientific project for him, it was personal. It was his birthright. And the silence from the crystal felt like a personal rejection. So here he is, a man who feels the weight of this mythic ancestry on his shoulders. A man who has the ear of the most powerful woman in the country. A man who owns more books than a university. He has the holy table, consecrated with prayers. He has the wax seals of God, intricate diagrams that are supposed to act like divine telephone numbers. He has the show stone, the crystal bowl, and the black obsidian mirror. He has the theory, the ambition, and the pedigree. He has everything he needs, except for one crucial component: a clear and reliable telephone line to the heavens. He needs an operator, a medium, a scryer who isn't a drunkard or a fraud. He closes his diary. The soft scratch of the quill, the only sound in the room. He is so close. He can feel it. But tonight, once again, the line is dead. What he doesn't know, as he blows out the candle and heads to bed, is that a man is walking toward London at this very moment. A man with a shadowy past and a silver tongue. A man who has heard rumors of the Queen's famous scholar and his strange, secret hobby. A man who is about to knock on Drive, Dee's door, and change everything. The scene shifts. You're no longer in the quiet, scholarly sanctuary of Mortlake. You're in a different part of London, one of the rougher districts, where the alleyways are narrow and smell of stale beer and desperation. The man you're about to meet, Edward Kelley, would not be welcome in Dee's library. In fact, HES not truly welcome in most respectable places. He stands in stark contrast to the venerable, white-bearded Dr. Kelley is younger, in his late 20s, with a restless, probing energy. He is lean, and his eyes are sharp and calculating. They miss nothing. But there's something else you notice about him, something strange that he tries to conceal. He wears his dark hair a little longer than is fashionable, and he has a habit of wearing a close-fitting black cap, pulled down low. If you were to catch him at an unguarded moment, perhaps as a gust of wind lifts the edge of his cap, you'd see why. His ears, or rather, what's left of them, are horribly mutilated. They've been cropped, cut short like a dog's. This was a birth defect or an accident. This was a punishment. This is our key piece of historical evidence about who this man was before he met Dee. In Elizabethan England, the brutal punishment of having one's ears cropped was reserved for specific crimes. It was a permanent mark of shame, a public advertisement that this person was not to be trusted. The crime was forgery. Kelley, or Talbot as he was known at the time, had been tried and convicted in the courts at Lancaster for counterfeiting legal documents or possibly coins. He was a conman, a forger, and the law had branded him as such for all the world to see. No, some accounts, likely spread by Kelley himself, tried to spin a more romantic tale. They whisper that he lost his ears for the crime of coining a form of alchemy or counterfeiting, and that he was a misunderstood genius. But the court records are far less glamorous. He was a common criminal, after his conviction. He seems to have threatened adopted the new name, Edward Kelley, to escape his past. And this brings us to a wonderfully bizarre and grim little side story, a piece of local folklore that attached itself to Kelley. It's said that after leaving Lancaster, he travelled to the quiet village of Blockley. There, he worked for a time as an apothecary, a seller of medicines and chemicals. The story goes that he and a partner went to a local cemetery, dug up a recently deceased man, and through the dark arts of necromancy, forced the corpse to speak and reveal the future to them. It's almost certainly a fabrication. A spooky tale that grew up around a man who was already seen as a sinister outsider. But the fact that this story was told and believed tells you everything you need to know about the reputation that preceded him. He was seen as a man who dabbled in the darkest of arts, a man who would cross any line. You watch him now as he navigates the London streets. H.E.S. not a scholar. While he might have briefly attended Oxford, he never graduated. He has a working knowledge of Latin, the universal language of the learned, but H.E.S. no doctor. D. His expertise lies not in ancient texts, but in people. He knows how to read them, how to size up their desires, their fears, their vanities. He is a master of what we would now call cold reading, the art of gleaning information about someone from their appearance, their language, and their reactions, then feeding it back to them as if it were a supernatural revelation. His journey has been a winding one. H.E.S. been a scrivener, a kind of legal secretary, which is likely where he learned the skills for his forgery. H.E.S. been a self-proclaimed alchemist, promising to turn base metals into gold for wealthy patrons who were more greedy than wise. H.E.S. been a crystal gazer, a fortune teller, a man living on the fringes, always one step ahead of the law or a disgruntled client. And it's in these circles, the underground network of mystics, charlatans, and genuine seekers, that he hears the name of Drive. John Dee. He hears about the famous library. He hears about the Queen's favour. And most importantly, he hears about the Doctor's singular obsession who's frustrating, fruitless search for a reliable esquire. And in this piece of information, Kelley's sharp, criminal mind spots the opportunity of a lifetime. Here is a man, a giant of intellect, who possesses everything: legitimacy, wealth, royal protection, but is blinded by one overwhelming desire. He has a lock, and Kelley believes he has the key. Or more accurately, he believes he can fake the key convincingly enough. So, was Kelley a complete fraud from the very beginning, or was he something more complicated? Historians have been wrestling with this for centuries. Was he a cynical con artist who saw Dee as the ultimate mark? Was he a genuine believer in his own psychic abilities who was also an opportunist? Or was he, perhaps, mentally unstable? A man who sometimes couldn't tell the difference between his own fabrications and reality? There's no simple answer. He was likely a tangled mess of all three. A man who knew how to lie, but perhaps had also told himself the same lies so many times that he started to believe them. You see him pause, looking at his own reflection in a grimy puddle. He adjusts his cap, ensuring the mark of his shame is hidden. He straightens his modest double. He is about to present himself as the solution to all of John Dee's problems. The forger is about to attempt his greatest masterpiece, not counterfeiting a coin or a deed, but counterfeiting the voice of God. He takes a deep breath and starts walking towards Mortlake, a predator closing in on his prey. The year is 1582. It's a damp, chilly March evening in Mortlake. The last of the winter gloom clings to the trees. Inside the Dee house, a fire crackles in the main hall, casting long, dancing shadows across the book-lined walls. Dr. Dee has just finished his supper. The mood in the house is, as usual, one of quiet, scholarly routine. But tonight, that routine is about to be shattered. There's a knock at the door. It's not the confident rap of a court messenger or the familiar call of a neighbor. It's a stranger's knock. When the door is opened, you see him standing there on the threshold, Edward Kelley. He is accompanied by a man named Thomas Waring, an acquaintance of Dee's who acts as the go-between. Kelley, for his part, plays the role of the humble, slightly mysterious seeker of knowledge. He doesn't stride in with bravado. He's learned that the best cons are built on a foundation of humility. He bows his head slightly, his eyes downcast, the ever-present cat pulled low. He introduces himself as Edward Talbot, using one of his known aliases and claims to be an antiquarian, a student of old books and mysteries. He has heard, he says, of the Great Drive, and his legendary library, and he has a question about a particular ancient manuscript he has acquired. The manuscript, of course, might not even exist. It's a pretext, a way to get in the door. D, ever the scholar and always generous with his knowledge, invites him in. You can feel the immediate, palpable contrast between the two men. D is almost 60, a patriarch with a flowing white beard, exuding an aura of gravity and immense learning. Kelley is not yet 30, a man who seems to have no roots, his past a carefully constructed folk. He is a coiled spring of nervous energy next to D's quiet, academic stillness. They talk for a while. D, likely eager for a new audience, probably speaks of his philosophies, of the divine mathematics of the cosmos. Kelley listens. He listens with an intensity that is both flattering and unsettling. He nods at the right times, asks just the right questions that show he understands the jargon of the occult world. He speaks of alchemy, of the philosopher's stone, of secrets hidden in the fabric of the world. He is, in essence, icing his job interview. And then, at the perfect moment, the conversation is steered towards scrying, toward the art of gazing into crystals to perceive hidden truths. D would have been cautious. But she has been burned before. He has a charlatan detector, honed by years of disappointment. But Kelley is different. He doesn't boast. Instead, he might have let slip, almost as an aside, that he possesses a certain spiritual sight. He might mention a curious powder he owns, a substance he acquired on his travels, which, when used, seems to aid in this communication. Here we encounter one of those historical details that blurs the line between fact and Kelley's fantastic stories. Kelley claimed to possess a small quantity of a mysterious red powder that could transmute base metals into gold. He said he and a companion had discovered it at Northwick Hill, finding it in a mysterious book inside a hollowed-out stone. This alchemical powder was his calling card, a physical prop to back up his mystical claims. Did it exist, maybe? It could have been a simple chemical compound that produced a gold-like sheen on metal, a classic alchemist trick. But for a man like D, desperate for proof of hidden knowledge, the story of the powder was intoxicating. The evening grows late. The initial meeting is a success. D is intrigued. There's something about this intense young man. He is not a bumbling drunk like Barnabas Saul. He seems to have a genuine, if unrefined, grasp of the great work. D invites him to return. The next time they meet, the pretense is dropped. They go directly to the small, private chamber, to the oratory. The air is thick with anticipation. You watch as Dick carefully prepares the space. He lays out the holy table, a specially designed piece of furniture covered in complex symbols and names of God. He places the wax tablets, the sigillum Dei Ameth, or seal of the God of Truth, under the table legs, believing they sanctify the space and anchor it to the divine. This is a scientific experiment for him, and every variable must be controlled. Finally, he brings out his most prized scrying stone, a crystal sphere he called the show stone. He hands it to Kelley. Kelley sits at the table. D sits at a separate desk, his quill poised over his diary, ready to record every word, every vision, with meticulous precision. The room is silent save for the crackle of a candle. Kelley cradles the crystal in his hands. He stares into it. He breathes slowly. D waits. He has been waiting for this for years. Is this another fraud, another disappointment? Then, Kelley speaks. His voice is low, different. He says he sees a light, a pinprick of light, swirling in the depths of the crystal. Then the light grows, and a figure begins to form. An angel, he says. An angel with wings of many colors. And the angel is speaking. The question that hangs in the air, a question historians have debated ever since, is what exactly happened in that room. Did Kelley simply see his own reflection and start spinning a tale? Did the crystal, combined with the power of suggestion, induce a state of self-hypnosis, or was something else going on? Some have even proposed that Dee, in his desperation, was a willing participant in the deception, that this was a kind of pious fraud to achieve a greater good. But looking at the earnest, desperate hope etched on Dee's face as he leans forward, Quill shaking slightly, that seems unlikely. He is a true believer, on the hook. And Kelley, the master forger, has just authenticated his first divine message. The partnership has begun. The air in the small chamber is electric. For the first time, after years of static and silence, the line to the heavens seems to be open. You are a witness to the very first of what would become hundreds of angelic conversations, or actions, as Dee meticulously called them in his diaries. Kelley's performance is masterful. He doesn't just say, "I see an angel." He builds the scene. His voice is a low, dramatic whisper. "I light." It is a soft, golden light, swirling like honey in the glass. He might begin. H.E.S. painting a picture for Dee, drawing him into the vision. Dee, at his desk, scribbles furiously, his academic skepticism melting away with every word. H.E.S. not just an observer anymore, H.E.S. a participant. The night coalesces. A form appears within it. Kelley continues, his eyes wide, fixed on the crystal. It is a child. A small child in a gown of shimmering white. This is a classic choice for a first vision. A child is a symbol of innocence and purity. Less threatening than a towering archangel. It's a gentle introduction. Dee, Quill scratching, asks questions. What is his name? Ask him his name. This is crucial for Dee. In magic and theology, knowing the true name of a being gives you a certain power and confirms its identity. Kelley closes his eyes for a moment. As if listening intently, he says his name is Uriel, he announces. The Archangel Uriel. The angel of light and wisdom. It's a perfect, almost a perfect, answer. Uriel was a figure Dee would have been intimately familiar with from apocryphal texts. Kelley has done his homework, or he's an incredibly lucky guesser. And this is where the genius of Kelley's con truly shines. He doesn't just deliver simple platitudes. He provides specifics, things that Dee can record and analyze. The angel Uriel, speaking through Kelley, gives Dee instructions. He tells him that his previous failures were because his tools were not properly consecrated. He tells him that God is pleased with his efforts, but that he must be more rigorous, more pure. This is brilliant. It validates all of Dee's past struggles, blaming them not on Dee's own failings, but on a technicality that can now be corrected. It flatters him while also establishing the new angelic authority. The angel then gives Dee his first tangible piece of supernatural information. Through Kelley, Uriel reveals the existence of a lost, holy book, the Book of Enoch, a text said to be written by the biblical prophet Enoch, containing all the secrets of heaven. The angel promises that, over time, they will dictate the contents of this book to Dee. For a man who owned the largest library in England, the promise of a lost book, let alone one dictated by angels, was the ultimate prize. It was an irresistible hook. Now, let's zoom in on a strange and fascinating detail of these early sessions. Kelley often complained of physical side effects during and after the scrying. He would report terrible headaches, a strange buzzing in his ears, and a feeling of being utterly drained. He would sometimes even writhe or cry out as if in pain, claiming the angelic power was almost too much for his mortal frame to handle. Was this part of the act? Almost certainly. It added a layer of authenticity to the proceedings. It wasn't easy. This communing with the divine, it took a physical toll. It made him seem less like a performer and more like a vessel, a conduit suffering for his art. The first session lasts for hours. Kelley, as Uriel, answers Dee's questions about the nature of the cosmos, the hierarchy of angels, and the path to true wisdom. The information is a clever mix. It's part Orthodox Christian theology, part Neoplatonic philosophy, and part stuff that Kelley seems to be making up on the spot. It's all filtered through a lens that perfectly aligns with Dee's own worldview. The angels sound, conveniently, a lot like Dr. John Dee. And what about the historical controversy surrounding these conversations? The biggest debate is about the source of the content. One school of thought, the Kelley's fraud school, holds that Kelley was a brilliant improviser. Drawing on the vast library of Dee's own home, he would listen to Dee talk, maybe even sneak a look at some of his books, and then regurgitate the ideas back to him, framed as divine revelation. A second school, the Folie Dieu school, suggests it was a shared delusion. Dee's powerful desire created a psychological space that Kelley, whether consciously or not, stepped into and filled. They were both trapped in a feedback loop of belief. A third, much smaller and more esoteric school of thought, suggests that something was genuinely being channeled, but it wasn't angels. They point to the increasingly strange and sinister turn the messages would later take as evidence that they had opened a line to something else. As the first session draws to a close, the angel Uriel gives a final instruction. He tells Dee that Kelley is his ordained prophet, his seer, and that Dee must care for him, house him, and pay him for his services. The angel has not only opened a spiritual channel but has also conveniently negotiated Kelley's employment contract. The light in the crystal fades. Kelley slumps in his chair, breathing heavily, wiping sweat from his brow. Dee, however, is energized. His face, which was etched with frustration just hours before, is now illuminated with ecstatic purpose. He looks at Kelley not as a stranger, but as a gift from God. The con man with the cropped ears has successfully transformed himself into a holy prophet. The long, strange partnership has been sealed, not by a handshake, but by the supposed word of an archangel in a crystal ball. The silence in Dee's soul has been broken, replaced by a voice that will lead him to fame, to ruin, and to the very edge of his sanity. With the angelic connection now firmly established, the instructions from the other side turn to the practical matter of hardware. It's not enough to have a crystal ball and a willing seer, according to the angels speaking, of course. Through Kelley, their communications require a specific set of tools, a kind of divine technology. And so begins the meticulous process of constructing the full ritual apparatus, every piece of which Dee documents with painstaking detail in his diaries. You're back in the oratory at Mortlake, but now it looks more like a workshop. The centerpiece of the whole setup is the holy table, or tabulis sancta. It's not just any table, following angelic instructions. It's built from sweet wood, 2 cubits square and 2 cubits high, about 3 feet by 3 feet. The legs of the table rest upon 4 small, specially created wax seals. These aren't just random lumps of wax. Each one is a complex diagram in its own right, engraved with geometric patterns, letters, and the names of angels. These are the grounding wires, the spiritual anchors that supposedly stabilize the entire operation and protect it from demonic interference. On the surface of the table itself is another, much larger wax seal, 9 inches in diameter. This is the Sigillum Dei Imf, the seal of the God of Truth. This is a real historical artifact, a design that Dee didn't invent but adapted from an older medieval manuscript on magic. It's an incredibly intricate diagram, a sort of cosmic switchboard, featuring a heptagon and a heptagram surrounded by concentric circles filled with the names of God and various angels. Dee and Kelley spent days painstakingly carving the master mold for this seal. The angels told them every letter had to be perfect. The process was a ritual in itself. And at the very center of this grand wax seal, on the tabletop, sits the main scrying instrument. While Dee had several, the most famous one was not a crystal ball, as is often depicted, but a black mirror. This brings us to a major historical knowledge point. Dee's most famous scrying tool was a piece of polished obsidian. This artifact still exists today. You can go see it in the British Museum. It's a beautiful, eerie object, a hand-sized disc of volcanic glass that seems to drink the light around it. Its origins are fascinating. It was made by the Aztecs in what is now Mexico and was likely brought to Europe after the Spanish conquest. For the Aztecs, obsidian mirrors were sacred objects used for divination and shamanic rituals. How it ended up in John Dee's hands is a mystery. Did he know of its Aztec origins? Did he believe that imbued it with a special power, or did he just like it because it was dark and mysterious? We don't know. But he called it his shoe stone. But that's not all. There's more gear. The angels also commanded the creation of a holy ring of Solomon, a gold ring that the Escry Kelley was to wear on his finger to grant him power and protection. It was to be inscribed with the name of an angel, Kelley, and surrounding the whole setup, on the floor, there was to be a great red silk cloth, draped over the table and cascading downwards, further insulating the holy space. Now for the weird little detail. Something that shows the strange blend of the sublime and the slightly ridiculous in all this. The angels were very specific about the table legs. They gave a precise list of 7 angels, and under each leg of the table, a small plaque with one of these names was to be placed. But a normal table only has 4 legs. Ever the literalist was thrown into confusion by this. How could he obey the divine command? Did he need a special 7-legged table? The angels, through Kelley, eventually clarified. They explained that the names of the 7 angels were to be placed around the 4-legged table. A sort of invisible, spiritual heptagon. It's a moment that shows you just how deeply Dee was in. He wasn't just going through the motions, he was agonizing over the details, terrified of getting a divine instruction wrong. The entire setup is a fascinating fusion. It's part Christian prayer, part Jewish Kabbalah, part Neoplatonic theory, and part medieval ceremonial magic. It's a physical manifestation of Dee's syncretic mind, and it serves a dual purpose. For Dee, it's a scientific instrument, a way to ensure the purity of the experiment. For Kelley, it's the perfect stage. It creates an atmosphere of immense gravity and importance. It's hard to feel like you're just making things up when you're sitting at a sacred table, wearing a magic ring, and staring into an Aztec mirror, or while a famous scholar records your every utterance as holy writ. The props make the performance real, for both the actor and the audience. So were these tools truly necessary for angelic communication, or was it all just elaborate stage dressing? This is a point of contention that goes to the heart of their partnership. Historians who view Kelley as a total fraud see the creation of this apparatus as his masterpiece of manipulation. He made the process so complex, so filled with arcane rules dictated by the angels, that he gained complete control. If the connection failed, it wasn't Kelley's fault. It was because a seal was misaligned or a prayer was said incorrectly. It was a built-in excuse. Others argue that Dee was the driving force here, that his scholarly, systematic mind demanded this level of ritual and structure. He couldn't accept a messy, unpredictable spirituality. He needed a system, a science of the divine. Whatever the reason, the stage is now set. The props are all in place. Every time they convene, the ritual is the same. The prayers are said. The ring is worn. The table is arranged just so. It's a theater of the holy. And in the center of it all sits Edward Kelley, staring into the black Aztec glass, ready to begin the show. He is no longer just a man in a room. He is the operator of a complex piece of divine machinery. And the messages are about to get much stranger. You're settled into the rhythm of the oratory. The sacred table is prepared. The obsidian mirror gleams under the candlelight, and Kelley is in his trance-like state. The angels begin to speak. But they're not speaking English anymore, or Latin, or any known human language. Through Kelley, the angels begin to dictate a new, celestial tongue. They call it the angelic language, or an ocean. This is, without a doubt, one of the most fascinating and baffling aspects of the entire Dee and Kelley saga. It's not just a few made-up words. The angels reveal an entire alphabet of 21 unique characters, with elegant, flowing shapes completely unlike Hebrew or Latin script. They dictate the names of these letters VH, Den, Kel, and they begin to deliver their messages in the strange new language, providing Kelley with an English translation as they go. D is ecstatic. This is the ultimate proof. A fraud might be able to invent a few visions, but to create an entire language on the fly that seems beyond the scope of a common criminal. For D, this is the original language of humanity, the tongue spoken by Adam in the Garden of Eden before the fall of the Tower of Babel. He believes he is rediscovering the lingua dominicae, the divine speech in which a word and the thing it represents are one and the same. To speak this language is to wield a creative power. He calls it an ocean, after the promised Book of Enoch. You watch as the process unfolds. It's laborious. The angel, speaking through Kelley, would show him a large chart or table, covered in letters. Kelley would then have to read the letters out, one by one, often backwards or in complex patterns, to form words and sentences. For example, an angel might say, in the first row, the fifth letter, in the third row, the seventh letter, in the second row, the first letter. D would write down the Enochian letters, and then Kelley would provide the English translation. It's an incredibly tedious method, seemingly designed to minimize the possibility of conscious invention. And the language itself is strangely coherent. It has its own syntax and grammar. It doesn't sound like random gibberish. Listen to a few words OL sun UFVA or SHI, which they translated as I reign over you, or Busti Goas, meaning glory of the Father. It has a guttural, powerful sound to it. D's diaries are filled with page after page of these angelic keys or calls 48 poetic verses in Enochian, which were supposed to be the keys to unlocking different spiritual realms or FYRS. This brings us to the central, enduring mystery. What is Enochian? Was it a genuine, supernaturally transmitted language? This is where academic debate rages. Let's break down the theories. The first, and most straightforward, theory is that it was an elaborate hoax, Kelley's magnum opus. Proponents of this view point out that while Enochian has a unique alphabet and vocabulary, its underlying grammar is deeply similar to English. The word order subject verb object. The use of prepositions, it functions very much like Kelley's native tongue. A linguist named Donald Laycock, who studied the Enochian texts extensively, concluded that it was a case of glossolalia, or speaking in tongues, but a highly structured and artistic one. He noted that certain phonetic features, like the sounds Kelley used, were very English. In this view, Kelley was a kind of linguistic savant, a brilliant con artist who created a believable, but ultimately artificial, language to keep his wealthy patron enthralled. A second theory is that it was a collaborative effort, a product of the strange psychological space between the two men. Perhaps Kelley produced the sounds and the raw material, the glossolalia, and D, with his deep knowledge of ancient languages and cryptography, unconsciously structured it, finding patterns and rules in the randomness. He was, in a way, decoding a language as Kelley was inventing it. The third, more esoteric theory is that it wasn't a hoax at all. Modern practitioners of magic, who have continued to use this system, argue that the language has a power to it that defies simple explanation. They believe that D and Kelley did, in fact, tap into something, and that Enochian is a genuine language of power. Whether it came from angels, aliens, or the collective human unconscious, they argue that its purpose isn't for mundane conversation but to create specific psychological states and magical effects. And here's a curious little detail that adds another layer of weirdness to the story. Kelley himself often seemed to find the Enochian language sessions deeply unpleasant. He would complain that the angels were speaking too fast, that the shapes of the letters hurt his eyes, and that the language itself felt harsh and barbaric. On several occasions, he tried to quit, claiming the work was too dangerous and too taxing. He once dramatically threw the scrying stone to the floor, threatening to abandon the project entirely. Was this just more theatrics to increase his own value, or was he genuinely frightened by what he had created? A con that had spiraled out of his control, into something he no longer understood. Whatever its origin, the Enochian language became the core of their entire system. It was their software. The angelic messages were no longer just philosophical discussions, they were now operational manuals, filled with Enochian words of power, complex diagrams of the spiritual world, and instructions for rituals of immense complexity. They were building a system of magic, piece by piece, dictated to them from the obsidian mirror. The scholar was overwhelmed with joy. He was no longer just a student of secret knowledge, he was its scribe, its sole human custodian. He had been given the keys to the kingdom, but what he didn't realize was that the locks they opened were on doors that were, perhaps, best left shut. Life at the house in Mortlake settles into a strange, intense new normal. From the outside, it's still the respectable home of Dr. John D., the Queen's advisor. Distinguished visitors come and go, seeking his advice on navigation or mathematics. But inside, a secret, parallel reality is unfolding. Your daily life here is now dictated by the whims of angels and the schedule of scrying sessions. Imagine the scene. A typical day begins and ends with prayer, but the main event, the action, happens in the sealed oratory, for hours on end. The only sounds are the low, monotonous drone of Kelley's voice as he recites what he sees in the stone, and the frantic scratching of Dee's quill, trying to keep up. Dee's wife, Jane, and their children have to tiptoe around the house, forbidden from disturbing the sacred work. The entire household revolves around this singular, all-consuming project. Let's talk about Jane Dee. She is a mostly silent figure in this part of the story, but her presence is constant. She was Dee's second wife, much younger than him, and by all accounts, a loyal and patient woman, but you can see the strain on her face. She has to manage a large household, raise children, and deal with a husband who is spending a small fortune and all his time locked in a room with a strange man with no ears, talking to invisible beings. The angels, through Kelley, frequently demanded periods of fasting and prayer, which disrupted meals and family life. They would also demand specific, often expensive, materials for their rituals. You can imagine Jane's exasperation, trying to balance the household budget while her husband is being told by an angel to commission a solid gold ring. And then there's the library, Dee's magnificent library, the heart of his scholarly life, is now both a resource and a source of tension. It's a key part of our story, a real historical fact. This was the greatest collection of knowledge in private hands in England. But now, that's being used in a new way. Kelley, the supposed conduit for brand new divine revelation, is living in a house with 4,000 books. Historians who are skeptical of Kelley's gifts see this as the perfect setup. Kelley was a quick study. Did he spend his off hours browsing Dee's collection of books on alchemy, Kabbalah, and angelology? It's highly probable. He could have absorbed enough information to create a pastiche of mystical ideas that would sound authentic to the desperate Dee. In this view, the library becomes Kelley's secret collaborator. The angel's pronouncements often mirrored themes and even specific terms found in the rare manuscripts Dee owned. It's the ultimate academic crime plagiarism presented as prophecy. Now for a bizarre and very specific detail from their daily life at Mortlake, one that shows the level of paranoia and secrecy involved. The angels told Dee to create a special box, sort of holy ark, to store all the magical implements when they weren't in use: the scrying stone, the wax seals, the gold ring. They were not to be seen by profane eyes. Dee constructed this box with his own hands from sweet wood, just as instructed. He kept it hidden. He even recorded a special Enochian prayer that had to be said every time the box was opened or closed. This wasn't just a hobby anymore, it had become a full-blown secret religion, with its own rituals, relics, and scriptures. The household is also growing. Kelley is now a permanent resident. Dee is supporting him financially. as the angels commanded, HES feeding him, clothing him, and paying him a stipend. Today, it's a small price to pay for access to the secrets of the universe to an outside observer. It looks suspiciously like a clever charlatan has managed to secure for himself a very comfortable living arrangement. The controversy among historians here is about Dee's own state of mind. Was he losing his grip on reality? Some medical historians have posthumously diagnosed him with various conditions, suggesting his intense desire and isolation made him susceptible to a shared delusional disorder. They argue that a man of his intellect could only accept Kelley's performance if his critical faculties were somehow impaired. But other historians push back against this. They argue that you can't judge a 16th century mind by 21st century standards of rationality. Dee was acting within the accepted worldview of his time, where the spiritual and material worlds were deeply intertwined. To him, what he was doing wasn't crazy, it was the most important scientific and spiritual research project on the planet. He wasn't losing his mind, he was, in his view, finally finding the mind of God. Life at Mortlake is a paradox. It's a place of immense intellectual activity, but it's hermetically sealed. The curtains are drawn. The door to the oratory is locked. Dee is becoming increasingly isolated from his academic peers. HES stopped publishing books on mathematics and astronomy. All his formidable intellectual energy is now funneled into one single, secret channel. He is compiling a massive, secret encyclopedia of divine knowledge. But he can't show it to anyone. The greatest scholar in England is talking only to angels, and his only collaborator is a convicted forger. It's a stable, but deeply weird and unsustainable, situation. And it's about to be disrupted by another knock on the door. One that will take their private obsession and launch it onto the world stage. The cloistered world of Mortlake, with its secret angelic conversations, is about to receive its most important visitor. One afternoon, a royal barge ties up at the landing stage near Dee's home. Out steps a retinue of courtiers, and among them, the unmistakable figure of Queen Elizabeth I. She has not come to discuss navigation or the colonies. She has come, in part, out of curiosity about the strange work she has been hearing whispers of. You watch the scene unfold from a respectful distance. This is a huge event for the household. Jane Dee and the servants are in a flurry of activity, preparing to receive the monarch. Dee himself, ever the courtier, puts on his finest robes and goes out to greet her. Kelley, notably, is kept out of sight. He is the secret engine of the operation, too strange and disreputable a figure to be presented to the Queen. His existence is, as to now, a classified annex to the main project. This visit is a documented historical fact, and it's a crucial one. It shows that Dee's activities were not entirely secret from the highest power in the land. The Queen walks through his famous library, and Dee, in his element, shows off his collection of books and scientific instruments. He is comfortable here, the scholar demonstrating his knowledge to his patron. He might show her his new, highly accurate maps of the coastline or a rare astronomical text. Then, the Queen asks to see it. The angel stone, the scrying mirror. This is a moment of supreme tension. Dee leads his sovereign into the oratory. The holy table is there, the silk cloth draped over it. He shows her the polished black obsidian mirror. He explains, in carefully chosen words, its purpose not as a tool for common fortune-telling, but as a receptacle for spiritual creatures, a means of philosophical and divine communication. What did the Queen really think? This is one of the great what-ifs of the story. Elizabeth I was an intensely intelligent, pragmatic, and famously hard-to-read monarch. She had survived countless plots and navigated the treacherous waters of European politics. She was not a woman given to flights of fancy. On one hand, she could have seen it all as a dangerous delusion, a sign that her brilliant advisor was straying into heresy and madness. Her reign was built on stability, and trafficking with spirits was anything but stable. On the other hand, she was a child of her age. She had employed Dee to choose her coronation date using astrology. She believed in omens and prophecies. The line between science and the supernatural was blurry for her, too. Was it possible that she was genuinely intrigued, that she thought, if anyone in my kingdom could actually do this, it would be Dee? She might have seen it as a potential source of secret intelligence, a spiritual weapon in her struggle against Spain. Her official position had to be one of disapproval. The Church of England did not sanction such things, but her private curiosity could have been very real. This is where historical interpretation splits dramatically. Some historians believe the visit was a gentle warning. The Queen came to see for herself how far Dee had gone, and her polite interest was a courtly way of saying, "Be careful, don't let this consume you." It was a reminder that he served her, not the angels. Other historians see it as a tacit endorsement. By visiting and showing interest, she was giving the project a kind of unofficial, deniable royal protection. As long as Dee was discreet, she would allow it to continue. Now for a peculiar and very revealing detail about this royal visit. Dee, wanting to impress his queen with the power of his angelic knowledge, offered to show her something truly remarkable. He claimed that the red alchemical powder that Kelley had brought with him, the powder that could supposedly turn lead into gold, was real. He cut a piece from a metal warming pan, he claimed, and using a tiny grain of the powder, transformed it into pure gold, which he then sent to the Queen as proof. It's an almost comical image, the great scholar, trying to prove his connection to the divine, resorting to what sounds like a classic alchemist sporty trick. Whether this actually happened, or if it was a story he told to bolster his credibility, is unknown, but it shows his desperation to prove that his work yielded tangible, valuable results. The Queen, for her part, remains inscrutable. She listens. She nods. She examines the obsidian mirror. And then she leaves. She makes no definitive pronouncement. She doesn't shut him down, but she doesn't offer to fund his research either. She leaves Dee in a state of suspended animation. He has shown his secret work to the most powerful person in England and has survived. He takes this as a victory, a sign of approval. But the visit changes the dynamic. It raises the stakes. Dee's work is no longer just a private spiritual quest. It now exists under the ambiguous, watchful eye of the crown. This makes him bolder, more confident that he is on the right path. He feels protected, but it also means that any failure, any public scandal, would be far more catastrophic. He is walking the tightrope, and the Queen has just reminded him how high up he is. So now, the secret life at Mortlake continues, but with a new sense of validation and a new, unspoken pressure to deliver results worthy of a Queen's attention. The angels had better have something important to say. The royal visit leaves Dee feeling vindicated. But it doesn't solve his fundamental problems. The angelic project is expensive, and the revelations, while spiritually profound, haven't yet produced a tangible, world-changing result. The Queen's ambiguous blessing doesn't come with a budget. The household at Mortlake is feeling the financial strain of supporting not just his family, but also Kelley and his wife, Tom, who is now living with them. The angels are demanding, but they don't offer to pay the bills. Into this tense, expectant atmosphere steps a new character, a man who seems to be the answer to all of Dee's prayers. His name is Albert Ascai, and he is a Polish nobleman, the Palatine of Seer. He arrives in England on a diplomatic mission, but his real interests are much less conventional. He is tall, imposing, with a grand beard and even grander ambitions, and he is, like so many powerful men of his era, obsessed with the occult. Ascai is a fascinating figure. He is a soldier, a politician, and a reputed alchemist. He has spent a fortune trying to find the Philosopher's Stone, funding various esoteric projects across Europe. He hears whispers about the Great Drive, too. The Queen's advisor, who is said to be in communication with angels. For a man like Ascai, this is irresistible. He seeks an introduction. The Earl of Leicester, a favorite of the Queen and a patron of Dee's, arranges the meeting. When Ascai arrives at Mortlake, he is the perfect audience. He is not a skeptic like a royal official might be. He is a true believer, and he is starstruck. He sees Dee not just as a scholar, but as a true magus, an adept. And he is immensely, fabulously wealthy. Or at least, he appears to be. Dee, for his part, sees Askai as a gift from God, the patron he has been waiting for. He is a man of power and influence who truly understands the importance of the great work. He doesn't need to be convinced he is already a convert. So they hold a scrying session for him. This is the moment of truth. You're in the oratory, but the dynamic is different. There's a new energy in the room. Askai sits with Dee, watching with rapt attention as Kelley takes his place before the obsidian mirror. The performance has to be perfect, and Kelley delivers. The angels appear in the stone, and they have a message specifically for their polished guest. They greet Askai by name. They praise his piety and his great destiny, and then they drop the bombshell. Speaking through Kelley, the angel Uriel declares that Askai is destined to be the new king of Poland. Not only that, but he will be a divinely appointed king, a conqueror who will defeat the enemies of Christendom, including the Ottoman Turks, and establish a new, holy kingdom. The angels even show Kelley a vision of a strange, eagle-like creature devouring a lesser eagle, symbolizing Askai's rise to power over the current Polish king. It's an audacious, breathtaking prophecy, and for Askai, a man of huge ambition who felt overlooked and undervalued back home, it's exactly what he wants to hear. All his secret dreams are being validated by a voice from heaven. He is completely, utterly hooked. Here we have a classic historical debate. Was this prophecy a cynical masterstroke by Kelley? Or was it a case of collective wishful thinking? The skeptical view is that Kelley was a genius at reading people. He saw in Askai a man hungry for power and tailored the angelic message to fit his ego perfectly. It was the ultimate compromise: a man, a kingdom, and he'll fund you for life. The other view is that all three men were caught in a powerful delusion. Dee wanted a patron, Askai wanted a crown, and Kelley was the conduit for their shared fantasy. They were creating a reality that they all desperately wanted to be true. And what about a quirky, little-known detail of this encounter according to Dee's diary? During one of the sessions for Askai, the angels warned him about a spy in his own household. They identified one of Askai's own servants as being in the pay of his political enemies back in Poland. Whether this was a genuine piece of psychic intelligence or a clever guess by Kelley to sow paranoia and make Askai even more dependent on them, it worked. Askai was shaken and even more convinced of the angels' power. He saw Dee and Kelley not just as spiritual guides, but as his secret intelligence service. Askai is so impressed that he makes them an offer. He invites Dee and Kelley to leave England and come with him to his estates in Poland. There, he says, they can continue their work in safety and with his full financial backing. He will be their patron and their protector. They will be the spiritual advisors for his glorious, divinely ordained future kingdom. For Dee, this is a monumental decision. It means leaving his home, his library, his position at the English court, and the tacit protection of his queen. It's a huge gamble. But England has grown stagnant for him. The queen is non-committal. The academic world is suspicious. He feels his great work is unappreciated. In Poland, with Askai, he sees a chance to finally put the angelic plan into action on a world stage. Kelley, for his part, is likely thrilled. A trip to the continent means new opportunities, new audiences, and a chance to escape the confines of Mortlake, where he is entirely dependent on Dee. After much agonizing and, of course, a final scrying session where the angels conveniently confirm that this is God's will, Dee agrees. He packs up his most essential books, the holy table, the scrying stone, and the wax seals. He, his wife Jane, and their children, along with Kelley and his wife Joan, prepare to join Albert Askai's retinue. They are leaving the relative safety of England and heading into the heart of Europe, chasing a prophecy of a phantom kingdom. The small, private obsession of Mortlake is about to go on the road. The year is now 1583. You stand on the docks, the salty spray of the English Channel in the air. A small flotilla of ships is being loaded with a mountain of luggage. This isn't just a weekend trip, it's a full-scale migration. You see the Dee and Kelley families, a strange, combined household, preparing to embark. There's Dr. Dee, looking anxious but resolute. A man leaving behind the only world age he has ever known. There's Jane Dee, his wife, shepherding their children, her face a mask of weary apprehension. She is pregnant again. Then you see Edward Kelley and his wife, Joan. Kelley seems energized, excited by the prospect of adventure. This departure marks a major turning point. The project is no longer a secret, contained within the walls of Mortlake. It's now mobile, and it's heading for the complex and dangerous political landscape of mainland Europe. They are pinning all their hopes on the promises of one man Albert Ascai. The journey itself is arduous. Sea travel in the 16th century is anything but glamorous. The crossing is rough, and many in the party are seasick. Once they land on the continent, they begin a long, slow journey overland by coach and on horseback. They are a bizarre traveling show. Imagine the sight of venerable English scholar, a shady-looking seer, 2 wives, a gaggle of children, and wagon loads of strange equipment, including the carefully packed holy table and the box containing the precious grindstones. Their patron, Ascai, travels in style, but the costs of this huge retinue are already beginning to mount. And here we hit upon a crucial, and somewhat awkward, historical fact that Dee and Kelley were blissfully unaware of at the time. While Ascai presented himself as a fabulously wealthy prince, his finances were, in reality, a complete mess. He was deeply in debt. His vast estates were heavily mortgaged. His trip to England wasn't just a diplomatic mission, he was also hoping to find new sources of funding. In Dee and Kelley, he saw a potential solution. He didn't just want angelic advice, he was counting on their alchemical skills to produce gold and solve his cash flow problem. He wasn't a patron finding a profit, he was a desperate debtor hiring a team he hoped could magically print money. Unaware of this precarious financial reality, the party arrives at Ascai's main estate near Krakow, Poland, and first, it's everything they were promised. They are given luxurious apartments in his castle. They are treated as honored guests. The scrying sessions resume with a new sense of purpose. The angels continue to assure Ascai of his glorious destiny. They dictate more of the Enochian keys, more details of the spiritual cosmos. But the pressure is mounting. Ascai wants results. The prophecies of the kingdom are wonderful, but kingdoms cost money. He grows increasingly impatient for the alchemical part of the deal to pay off. He provides them with a laboratory and materials, expecting them to start producing gold. And this is where a subtle rift begins to form between Dee and Kelley. Dee is primarily interested in the OGIA, the high magic of angelic communication, the spiritual wisdom. For him, alchemy is a secondary, if interesting, part of the divine sciences. Kelley, on the other hand, is much more of a practical alchemist. HES, the one with the supposed transmuting powder. The one who is expected to perform the physical work in the laboratory. The angels, conveniently, tell Dee that his role is to pray and record, while Kelley's is to perform the vulgar work of chemical transmutation. Here's a curious, little-known detail about their time in Poland. Kelley began to complain more and more. He said the angels were angry. He claimed that Ascai's impatience and his focus on worldly wealth were offending the spiritual creatures. He started to use the angels to put pressure back on their patron. It was a clever tactic. Any failure in the alchemical lab wasn't his fault, it was Ascai's fault for not being pious enough. The situation becomes a tense triangle of mutual dependence and growing disappointment. Ascai is sinking deeper into debt to support this expensive entourage, and he's not seeing any return on his investment. Dee is trapped in the middle, trying to placate his patron while also managing his increasingly temperamental seer. And Kelley holds all the cards, as he is the sole link to the angels and the only one who supposedly knows the secret of transmutation. The central historical debate here is about the failure in Poland. Was it doomed from the start because of Asgai's financial problems, or did the project collapse under the weight of its own fantastic promises? Some historians argue that Asgai was simply a bad investment and the whole enterprise was built on a foundation of sand. Others suggest that Kelley, realizing he couldn't actually produce gold on demand, deliberately sabotaged the relationship with Asgai to create an excuse to leave. He engineered a spiritual reason for the failure to cover up his own material incompetence. After several months, the money runs out. Asgai, his credit exhausted, can no longer support them. It's a humiliating moment. The grand patron who was promised a kingdom can't even pay his household bills. The dream of a Polish holy kingdom, conceived in the oratory at Mortlake, dies a quiet death in a castle in Krakow. The angelic prophecies have come to nothing. Asgai, embarrassed and broke, makes his excuses and fades from the story. Dean, Kelley, and their families are now stranded in the middle of Europe. With no patron and very little money, the grand tour has turned into a disaster. They are refugees of a failed spiritual enterprise. Their only asset is their system of angelic magic. They have no choice but to pack up the holy table and the scrying stone once again and go in search of a new sponsor. Their journey into the heart of Europe is far from over, and it's about to get much more dangerous. The dream of a Polish kingdom has dissolved, leaving Dee and Kelley and their families in a precarious position. They are adrift in Central Europe, a land of political intrigue and religious tension. They have burned their bridge with Asgai, and going back to England isn't an option. Returning as a failure, having abandoned his post at court, would be a profound humiliation for Dee. So they do the only thing they can. They try to find a new buyer for their unique services. Their next target is the most powerful man in the Holy Roman Empire, Emperor Rudolf II. They pack their celestial hardware and make the long journey to the city of Prague. But this time, is not just a political capital, it is the absolute epicenter of weirdness in Europe. It's the continent's capital of alchemy, astrology, and all things occult. Emperor Rudolf II is not a pragmatic ruler like Elizabeth I. He is a melancholy, reclusive, and deeply obsessive collector of curiosities, both natural and supernatural. His court is a magnet for astronomers, artists, alchemists, and every mystic, magus, and charlatan on the continent. If Dee and Kelley can't find a patron here, they can't find one anywhere. They arrive in Prague and, through a connection, manage to secure an audience with the emperor. This is a huge opportunity, a chance to pitch their project to the one monarch in Europe who might be even more receptive than Asgai was. But the audience does not go as planned. You are fly on the wall in the grand, jutted halls of Prague Castle. Rudolf II is surrounded by celestial globes, strange mechanical contraptions, and priceless works of art. He is an intelligent man, but also deeply paranoid and prone to fits of depression. He listens as Dee, the respectable scholar, lays out their story. Dee explains his quest for divine wisdom, for the Prisca Theologia or ancient theology, that will reunite mankind. He presents himself not as a sorcerer, but as a holy philosopher. But then the conversation turns to Kelley, and Kelley, it seems, makes a fatal error in judgment. Instead of being humble, Kelley is arrogant. He boasts of his power, and, according to some accounts, he delivers a message from the angels that is less of a divine revelation and more of a threat. The angel, speaking through Kelley, admonishes the emperor for his sins and commands him to repent and heed their words. You can imagine how this went down. Rudolf II was the Holy Roman Emperor. He was not used to being lectured, especially not by a strange Englishman with mutilated ears who claimed to be channeling a spirit. This brings us to a crucial historical point: the power of courtly etiquette. In the 16th century, how you said something was just as important as what you said. Kelley's confrontational style, which may have worked on the ambitious Asgai, was a disaster with the paranoid and imperious Rudolf. The emperor was intrigued by their claims but deeply put off by their delivery. And here's a funny, pathetic little detail. Desperate to prove their worth, Dee and Kelley once again fall back on the promise of alchemy. Kelley gives the Emperor's personal physician a sample of his mysterious red powder. He performs a small transmutation, supposedly turning a piece of mercury into gold. But the demonstration, meant to be a show of immense power, fails to impress. Rudolph has seen 100 alchemists perform similar tricks. He is looking for something more, something that doesn't feel like a stage performance. The Emperor doesn't throw them in a dungeon, but he doesn't embrace them either. He keeps them at arm's length. He is suspicious. His advisors, particularly the papal nuncio, the Pope's ambassador, are actively working against the two Englishmen. To the Catholic Church, what Dee and Kelley are doing is not holy communication, it is necromancy, a demonic heresy. The nuncio whispers in the Emperor's ear that these men are dangerous sorcerers, and probably English spies as well. The debate among historians here is fierce. Why did Rudolph reject them? Was it Kelley's arrogance? Was it the political pressure from the church? Was it that Rudolph, a true connoisseur of the occult, simply sensed that they were not the genuine article? Some historians argue that Rudolph's own alchemists and mystics likely examined Dee and Kelley's claims and found them wanting. They failed the peer review process of the 16th century magical community. Others believe it was purely political. The Emperor could not be seen to be endorsing to Protestant Englishmen who claimed to be talking to angels, not when the religious wars were tearing the empire apart. After months of waiting and probe, hoping for a sign of imperial favor, the hammer finally falls. Under pressure from the papal nuncio, Emperor Rudolph II issues an order. Dee and Kelley are to be banished from his lands. They are accused of practicing forbidden magic, of being necromancers. They are given 6 days to leave Prague. This is a devastating blow. They have been publicly rejected and branded as heretics. They are now not just financial refugees, but religious outcasts. They have failed with the Polish nobleman, and they have failed with the Holy Roman Emperor. Their options are dwindling. They leave Prague in disgrace, their strange caravan of families and magical furniture trundling away from the city of dreams that has turned into a nightmare. They are deeper in trouble than ever before, and their relationship, already strained, is about to be pushed to the breaking point. The angels in the stone had promised them the keys to the world instead. They have led them to a series of locked doors. Expelled from Prague, the weary caravan of scholars and mystics has nowhere to go. They are stateless, shuffling across the German and Bohemian countryside, looking for a safe haven. Their reputation now precedes them not as holy men, but as disgraced necromancers, doors that might have once been opened to the famous drive. They are now firmly shut. The winter is setting in, and their funds are dangerously low. This is the absolute lowest point of their European adventure. But just when all seems lost, a lifeline appears. It comes from another wealthy, occult-obsessed nobleman, a man named William of Rosenberg, or William of Rosenberg in English. He is one of the richest and most powerful lords in Bohemia, second only to the Emperor himself, and, like Rudolph II, he is fascinated by alchemy and the esoteric art. Unlike the Emperor, however, he is less concerned with papal opinion and more willing to take a risk. He has heard of the two Englishmen and their spectacular failure in Prague, and it has only piqued his curiosity. Rosenberg offers them sanctuary in his domain, in the beautiful and remote town of Trebon in southern Bohemia. For Dee and Kelley, it's a miracle. They gratefully accept the offer and make their way to this new refuge. You arrive with them in Trebon. It's like stepping into a fairy tale. The town is dominated by a massive castle, surrounded by picturesque lakes and forests. It feels a world away from the dangerous politics of Prague. Here, under Rosenberg's powerful protection, they are safe. He provides them with a house, a generous stipend, and most importantly, a state-of-the-art alchemical laboratory. For a time, it seems like they have finally found their ideal situation. Rosenberg is the perfect patron. HES rich, HES enthusiastic, and HES willing to leave them alone to do their work. The scrying sessions start up again, and the alchemy begins in earnest. This period, from 15 takes us to 1588. becomes the most productive and also the most intense and bizarre chapter of their partnership. The focus of their work now shifts decisively toward alchemy, while Dee remains obsessed with the angelic conversations and the Enochian system. Their patron is primarily interested in the Philosopher's Stone. He wants gold, and for a while, it seems Kelley is actually delivering. This is a major historical point during their time in Trebon. Kelley's fame as an alchemist exploded. He conducted a number of supposed projections, public demonstrations where he would take a tiny amount of his red powder and appear to transmute a large quantity of a base metal, like mercury, into pure gold. Did he really do it? This is one of the most enduring mysteries. Skeptics argue that these were all elaborate tricks. Kelley was a master of sleight of hand and chemical deception. He could have used a crucible with a false bottom, or introduced a piece of real gold into the mixture at the last second. The science of chemistry was in its infancy, and it would have been easy to fool an eager, non-expert audience. But here's a weirdly compelling detail that complicates the fraud theory. Kelley's fame grew so great that he was knighted by his patron, and began styling himself Sir Edward Kelley. More astonishingly, even Emperor Rudolph II, the man who had expelled them from Prague, heard tales of Kelley's alchemical prowess and began to take a renewed interest. He started sending messages, tentatively trying to lure Kelley back to Prague this time, not as a prophet, but as an alchemist who could potentially solve the Empire's financial woes. So what do historians think the academic world is? Of course, deeply divided. The Kelley the trickster theory is the most dominant, but a minority view suggests something more complex might have been happening. They don't argue that he violated the laws of physics, but that the line between what was real and what was performance was becoming hopelessly blurred. Kelley may have stumbled upon some legitimate, if not yet understood, chemical processes that produced startling results, or perhaps the sheer intensity of the belief shared by everyone in that castle Kelley and Rosenberg created a kind of psychological bubble where the impossible felt real. In this alchemical paradise, the angelic conversations continue, but their tone begins to change, with the pressure to produce gold, and with Kelley's star on the rise, the power dynamic between him and Dee is shifting. Kelley is no longer just the humble seer, the employee. He is Sir Edward Kelley, the famous alchemist, the man their powerful patron depends on. He is becoming more arrogant, more demanding, and the angels in the stone are reflecting his change in attitude. The messages are becoming darker, more erratic, and more controlling. The refuge of Trebon is a beautiful place, but the seeds of a psychological catastrophe are being sown in the alchemical laboratory in the scrying chamber. The partnership that began with a shared spiritual quest is slowly curdling into a toxic rivalry, fueled by ego, ambition, and the immense pressure to turn lead into gold. You'd think that finding a safe harbor in Trebon under the protection of a wealthy patron would stabilize the situation. For a while, it does, but the isolation and the intense, hothouse atmosphere of their work start to have a strange effect. The success in alchemy, instead of bringing them together, begins to drive a wedge between Dee and Kelley. Kelley is now Sir Edward, a celebrated alchemist. He's tasting a level of fame and respect that he, the forger with the cropped ears, could never have dreamed of. He starts living a more lavish lifestyle, enjoying the fruits of his newfound status. He is no longer just Dee's instrument, he sees himself as the main event. Dee, on the other hand, is becoming increasingly marginalized, while he is still the master of the project, the keeper of the angelic diaries. He watches as Kelley, his subordinate, garners all the public acclaim. Dee is the theorist, Kelley is the star performer. There's a growing tension in their small, enclosed world. Dee is focused on the holy messages, the Enochian language, the grand cosmic plan. Kelley is getting bored with it. Scrying is hard work, and it doesn't carry the same glamour as turning mercury into gold in front of an admiring lord. This growing frustration in Kelley manifests in the scrying sessions. The angels start to reflect his own resentment and impatience. Their messages, which were once grand and philosophical, now become petty, scolding, and erratic. This is a well-documented phase in Dee's diaries. The angels begin to rail against Dee for his sins and his doubts. They accuse him of being too worldly, of not having enough faith. Of course, from a psychological perspective, this is clearly Kelley projecting his own frustrations onto Dee, using the angelic voices as a way to criticize his older partner without having to do it directly. It's a form of passive-aggressive spiritual warfare. Then comes the news from Prague. Emperor Rudolf II, hearing the sensational reports of Kelley's alchemical successes, has changed his mind. He who once banished them as necromancers now sees them as a potential national treasure. He sends feelers to their patron, and then directly to Kelley, inviting him back to Prague. Not Dee, the great scholar, just Kelley, the gold maker. This is a moment of profound crisis. For Kelley, it's the ultimate vindication, an invitation from the Emperor himself. This is his ticket to the big leagues, a chance to escape from Dee's shadow and Rosenberg's provincial court. For Dee, it's a disaster. It threatens to break up the partnership entirely and leave him stranded, a general without his key officer. The historical debate here centers on Kelley's motivations. Was he actively planning to abandon Dee all along, using the Trebon period to build his own reputation, or was he genuinely torn? Some historians believe Kelley had grown to resent Dee's intellectual superiority and controlling nature and saw the Emperor's offer as a liberation. Others suggest that Kelley was actually intimidated by the prospect. Working for the Emperor was a much more dangerous game. Failure would not be met with a polite dismissal, but potentially with a prison cell. To make matters worse, Kelley claims the angels are furious about the Emperor's offer. This leads to a strange and revealing detail recorded by Dee. One day, Kelley reports that the angel Uriel appeared in the stone, not in a shimmering gown, but in a frightening, demonic form, threatening him with damnation if he were to abandon the holy work to serve a worldly prince like Rudolf. Is this Kelley's genuine fear manifesting as a terrifying vision, or is it a brilliant, manipulative move by having the angels forbid the move to Prague? Kelley can play hard to get. He can tell the Emperor's messengers that he is divinely forbidden from coming, thus increasing his own value and making Rudolf want him even more. It's a high-stakes negotiation, and Kelley is using the angels as his bargaining chips. The Emperor, however, is persistent. The offers get better. He promises Kelley a castle, a huge salary, and the title of Baron of the Kingdom of Bohemia. It's an offer that's almost impossible to refuse. The relationship between Dee and Kelley becomes incredibly strained. They argue constantly. Dee pleads with Kelley to stay focused on their sacred mission. Kelley complains that Dee doesn't appreciate him, that he is doing all the hard work while Dee just sits and writes. The cold reception from the Emperor that they experienced on their first visit has now, ironically, turned into an imperial obsession focused on only one of them. The man Rudolf once dismissed is now the man he believes can save his empire's finances. This reversal of fortune completely unbalances the delicate equilibrium of the Dee-Kelley partnership. Dee, the man who started this entire quest, is being written out of his own story. The stage is being set for the final, catastrophic act of their collaboration. The angels in the stone, sensing this turmoil, are about to deliver their most shocking and destructive message yet. The pressure cooker environment in Trebon is reaching a boiling point. Kelley's star is rising in the outside world, with the Emperor's offers growing more insistent. Inside their small household, however, things are deteriorating rapidly. Kelley is becoming more erratic and resentful, and this is directly mirrored in the scrying sessions. The angelic messages, once a source of divine comfort and wisdom for Dee, are now a source of constant anxiety. The angels, who once called themselves Uriel and Gabriel, are now often replaced by new, more sinister-sounding entities. One of the most prominent voices to emerge during this period is a female figure who calls herself Mad IMI. She is described by Kelley as a beautiful, alluring spirit, but her messages are anything but comforting. She is capricious, demanding, and often speaks in riddles. She seems to delight in sowing discord between the two men. You are there in the oratory, and the atmosphere has changed. It's no longer a sacred space of quiet contemplation. It's thick with tension. Kelley will begin a session, only to break off suddenly, claiming the angel is angry or that Dee's presence is unclean and is interfering with the signal. He uses these angelic tantrums to exert control. If Dee questions him or pushes back, Kelley can simply have an angel throw a fit and shut down the conversation. This is a key part of the historical record, straight from Dee's diaries. The angels start to make increasingly bizarre and personal demands. They criticize Dee's prayers. They criticize his wife, Jane. They complain about the food they are being served. It's as if the grand, cosmic telephone line has been hijacked for a series of petty grievances. To a modern observer, it's transparently Kelley airing his own complaints under a holy guise. But for Dee, a man who has staked his entire life and reputation on the authenticity of these voices, it's a spiritual crisis. He is trapped. If he accuses Kelley of fraud, his entire life's work for the past 7 years collapses into a meaningless sham. He would have to admit to himself that he, a genius, was duped by a common criminal. His pride and his faith make that possibility unthinkable, so he is forced to accept the messages as real. Which means he must accept that God's messengers are behaving like spoiled, manipulative children. He rationalizes it. He writes in his diary that these are tests of his faith, trials sent from God to purify his soul. And here's a deeply strange and disturbing detail from this period. The angels, through Kelley, begin to preach a radical, anti-Neoman doctrine. Antemonitionism is the theological belief that faith in God places you above the law, that a truly saved person is no longer bound by conventional morality. The angels start to suggest that for the truly elect like Dee and Kelley, the normal rules of sin and propriety no longer apply. They are on a special mission from God, and the old commandments are for ordinary people. This is a dangerous theological turn, and it's not just abstract philosophy. The angels begin to hint that Dee and Kelley must become one. They must share everything, hold nothing back from each other, to prove their absolute commitment to the divine work. The ambiguity of this command hangs in the air, creating a new and sinister undercurrent in their relationship. The historical debate around this phase is intense. Was Kelley consciously laying the groundwork for what was to come? Was he deliberately introducing this radical theology to justify a future transgression? Or was his own psyche beginning to fracture under the pressure? Some biographers have suggested that Kelley himself was losing control, that the character of the seer he had been playing for so long was starting to take over his actual personality. He was no longer just a conman pulling the strings, he was becoming entangled in the web of his own lies. His own desires and resentments bubbling up and spewing out in the form of these angry, unstable angelic personalities. Dee, for his part, is in an agony of confusion. He redoubles his prayers. He fasts more rigorously. He tries to understand what he is doing wrong to displease the heavens so much. He is in a classic cycle of abuse, where the victim blames himself for the erratic behavior of the abuser. The angels have told him that Kelley is his ordained prophet, the only one who can hear their voices. So when the prophet delivers a message of anger and condemnation, Dee's only recourse is to look inward and find the fault within himself. The beautiful refuge of Trebon has become a psychological prison. The angels, who were once guides, have become tormentors. The partnership, once a shared quest for knowledge, has become a toxic, codependent relationship. The stage is being meticulously set by the angels for their final, most devastating demand. The foundation of trust and faith is being systematically eroded, preparing the way for an instruction that will shatter the lives of everyone involved. In the intense, claustrophobic drama playing out between Dee and Kelley, two crucial characters have remained largely in the shadows: their wives, Jane, Dee, and Joan Kelley. Up until now, they have been silent witnesses, managing their households, raising children, and enduring the strange, all-consuming obsession of their husbands. Now, as the angelic messages grow more intrusive and personal, the camera turns to them. Let's first look at Jane Dee. You see her moving through the house in Trebon. a place that is supposed to be a safe haven but feels more like a gilded cage. She is a woman of her time, expected to be dutiful and obedient to her husband. She is much younger than John Dee, married to him when she was a lady in waiting at court. Their marriage seems to have been, by all accounts, a loving one, at least initially. But 7 years of this angelic work have taken their toll. She has followed her husband from the comfort of her home in England, across the sea, on a grueling journey through Europe. She has given birth to children on the road. She has endured the shame of being expelled from Prague, and she has had to share her home and her husband's attention with Edward Kelley, a man she deeply distrusts and dislikes. Dee's own diaries, while focused on the angels, give us small, heartbreaking glimpses into Jane's state of mind. He records instances of her weeping in frustration. She complains about Kelley's arrogance and the constant financial instability. At one point, she directly confronts her husband, pleading with him to abandon the project and return to England. She sees Kelley for what he is, a manipulator who is leading her husband down a path to ruin. But her pleas are dismissed. Dee, in his diary, chides her for her lack of faith and her womanly concerns for worldly things. He is told by the angels via Kelley, of course, that his wife's doubt is a spiritual obstacle. Then there is Joan Kelley. She is an even more enigmatic figure. We know very little about her background. She was a young widow when she married Edward. Their relationship appears to have been volatile and unhappy, while Jane Dee seems to be a victim of the situation. Joan is often portrayed in a more ambiguous light. Dee's diaries describe her as argumentative and worldly. He records that she and her husband fought frequently and loudly. He is a curious historical detail that offers a window into the household dynamics. The Kelleys lived in a state of constant financial dependence on Dee. Joan, unlike Jane, seems to have been less patient with the lofty spiritual goals and more concerned with her own comfort and status. She and her husband would often argue about money, and these arguments would spill over into the tense communal living space. You can imagine the atmosphere in the house. To families, bound together by a bizarre spiritual enterprise, but riven by jealousy, distrust, and financial resentment. The two women, Jane and Joan, are trapped in their husbands' shared delusion, with no power and no voice. The historical controversy here is how much these women knew or believed. Were they true believers in the angelic communications? It seems highly unlikely, especially for Jane. Her recorded actions and pleas suggest she saw the work as a destructive folly. Was she afraid of Kelley? Almost certainly. He had an enormous influence over her husband, and the angels had already begun to single her out for criticism. To oppose Kelley was to oppose God's supposed messengers. What about Joan? Her position is more complex. Did she know her husband was a fraud? Most historians think she must have. She would have seen him in his private moments, without the performance. Did she actively participate in the deception, perhaps helping him find information to use in the scrying sessions? Or was she a resentful but silent partner, going along with it for the financial security it provided? This is a question that the historical record leaves unanswered. She is a ghost in the narrative, her true thoughts and motivations lost to time. As the angelic messages become more personal and controlling, they begin to focus more and more on the impurity within the household. The angels complain that the love between the two men is not perfect. They are still holding things back from each other. The presence of their wives, the bonds of conventional marriage, are presented as obstacles to the ultimate spiritual union required for the great work to succeed. The two women, who have sacrificed everything to follow their husbands on this quest, are now being framed as the problem. Their quiet, suffering presence is an inconvenience to the grand spiritual narrative being spun by Kelley. They are no longer just silent background characters. They are about to be dragged, unwillingly, to the very center of the stage for the final, horrifying act. Their bodies and their lives are about to become the subject of the angels' most shocking command. The date is April 18, Yom Batsi. It is a day that will live in infamy in the personal history of John Dee. The atmosphere in the Trebon oratory is heavier than ever before. The arguments between Dee and Kelley have been escalating. Kelley has been threatening to leave for Prague, to accept the Emperor's offer. Dee is desperate to keep him, to keep the Angelic project alive. They convene for a scrying session, a last-ditch attempt by Dee to receive some divine guidance that will resolve the crisis. Kelley takes his position before the stone. The angel Mad I Am appears. Her message today is not about alchemy or the fate of kingdoms. It is about them. She begins by scolding them, as she often does. She tells them their work has stalled because their union is incomplete. They have not truly become one in the eyes of God. They are still bound by worldly attachments, by freshly unselfish concerns. Dee, Quillenhern, records her words, his heart likely sinking with every syllable. He knows a terrible demand is coming. Then, Mad I Am delivers the instruction. It is the most shocking and infamous moment of their entire 7-year collaboration. The angel declares that for their work to proceed, for them to be truly unified in spirit, they must share all things in common. And all things includes their wives. The angel commands them to engage in what the diaries delicately refer to as cross-matching or copulation. They are to swap wives. John Dee is to lie with Joan Kelley, and Edward Kelley is to lie with Jane Dee. The angel presents this not as a sinful act, but as a holy commandment, a profound mystical test of their obedience. It is the ultimate sacrifice to prove that they hold nothing back from God and from each other. To refuse, the angel warns, would be to incur divine wrath and bring their entire sacred mission to an end. You can feel the silence in the room after this pronouncement. It's a stunning, world-shattering moment for Kelley, who delivers the message. His face is likely a mask of grim prophecy. For Dee, it is a thunderbolt that strikes at the very core of his being. He is a devout Christian, a husband, and a father. The command is a violation of everything he believes in, a direct contradiction of the 10 Commandments. This is the central, explosive event of the story, and the historical debate around it is, understandably, intense. What was really going on here? The most common interpretation is that this was Kelley's ultimate power play, a move both sinister and brilliant in its cruelty. In this view, Kelley wanted one of two things, or perhaps both. First, he may have desired Dee's young wife, Jane. The angelic command would give him a way to satisfy his lust under the guise of holy obedience. Second, and more strategically, this was his escape plan. He presented Dee with a command so abhorrent, so impossible to accept, that he knew Dee would have to refuse. When Dee refused, the angels would be angry. The partnership would be divinely terminated, and Kelley would be free to leave for Prague with a clean conscience, able to say, I didn't leave drive. Dee broke the covenant. It was a manufactured crisis designed to give him a righteous exit. A second, more psychological theory suggests that this was the moment Kelley's conspired into genuine madness. The years of performance, the pressure, the toxic environment, it all culminated in this bizarre, transgressive fantasy bubbling up from his subconscious and spewing out as a divine command. He was no longer in control of the fiction he had created. And here's a truly strange and pathetic detail from Dee's own account. The angel did not just issue the command, it provided a theological justification. Mad I argued that in the time of the early Christian apostles, all things were held in common, and that what men called sin was merely a human construct. She argued that true innocence meant being naked before God and each other, without shame. She was essentially preaching a form of radical, libertine spirituality, turning Christian doctrine completely on its head to justify the act. What was Dee's immediate reaction? He was horrified. His diary entry for that day is filled with anguish. He writes, I was in a great amazement, grief, and astonishment. He argues with the angel. He pleads. He cites scripture. He says that this command must be from a devil, not a spirit of God, for God would not command his creatures to sin. But Kelley, as the angel's mouthpiece, is relentless. The angel Uriel even appears to back up Mad I's command, scolding Dee for his niceness and his attachment to worldly reputation. The angel says, The Lord hath put down his foot and said, I will be obeyed. They have backed him into an impossible corner. To obey is to violate his faith, his marriage, and his morality. To disobey is to defy God, to admit his entire 7-year quest has been a lie, and to lose his profit. The most learned man in England is being torn apart, his mind and soul stretched on the rack of a single, terrible angelic decree. The angelic command for wife swapping hangs in the air, a toxic cloud that poisons everything in the Trebon house. The days that follow are a slow-motion nightmare. And you are a silent witness to the agony of a great mind being systematically broken down. The focus of our story now shifts inward, into the tortured soul of Dr. John Dee. His diaries from this period are some of the most extraordinary and heartbreaking documents of the era. They are a raw, real-time record of a man's spiritual and psychological collapse. You see him wrestling with an impossible choice, his quills scratching out prayers, arguments, and expressions of pure despair. His first reaction is denial and resistance. He spends hours in prayer, alone, begging God for a sign, for some clarification. He writes, "Lord, what is this? My heart is divided." He tries to reason his way out of it. He tells himself it must be a test, like the one God gave to Abraham when he commanded him to sacrifice his son, Isaac. Surely, God doesn't actually want him to go through with this monstrous act. Surely, at the last moment, an angel will stay his hand and say it was only a trial of his faith. He confronts Kelley again and again. This cannot be God's will, he argues. It is a temptation from the devil to make our good works stink in the nostrils of men. But Kelley is implacable. He simply shrugs and says he only reports what the angels tell him. If Dee doesn't like the message, that's between him and God. Kelley has positioned himself as a neutral conduit, washing his hands of the moral implications. The angels are angry, he reports. They say you love your wife more than you love God's wisdom. This is the key to the psychological pressure being applied to Dee. His deepest identity is that of a pious Christian philosopher. The accusation that he is placing worldly love above divine command is an attack on his very sense of self. It fills him with guilt and terror. Is he a hypocrite? Is his faith a sham? We must also consider Jane Dee. John has to explain this angelic command to his wife. We don't have a record of that conversation, but we can imagine the horror, the tears, the disbelief. Jane, who already despised Kelley, is now being told that God wants her to sleep with him. Her reaction is one of absolute refusal and disgust. She records her great sorrow and her weeping and trembling. For the first time, she is not just a passive observer but an active resistor, a guardian of her own and the family's honor. Her resistance adds to Dee's turmoil. To obey the angels, he must now not only violate his own conscience but actively coerce his grieving wife into an act she finds repulsive. And here is a small, poignant detail that reveals Dee's state of mind. He begins to look for loopholes. In his diary, he scribbles frantic calculations and astrological charts, trying to see if there is some hidden meaning, some way to interpret the command metaphorically. Could lying together mean something else? A spiritual union, a shared prayer? He is like a lawyer on death row, scouring the law books for a technicality that will save him. But the angels, via Kelley, are brutally clear. They want physical act. There is no metaphor. The historical controversy here is profound. Why did Dee, a brilliant man, not simply walk away? Why didn't he just say, "This is madness. You, Kelley, are either a fraud or insane. This partnership is over." One theory is pride. After 7 years, after sacrificing his career, his home, and his reputation, admitting it was all a sham was too great a humiliation to bear. He was too invested to fold. To denounce Kelley would be to declare his own life's work a catastrophic failure. Another theory points to genuine fear. Dee truly believed he was in communication with powerful spiritual entities. The angels had threatened him with terrible punishments if he disobeyed. He feared for his soul, and perhaps even for the physical safety of his family. What if these angry angels decided to strike his children with sickness in his worldview? This was a real and terrifying possibility. A third view, a more psychological one, is that Dee was caught in a state of cognitive dissonance. He held to completely contradictory beliefs at the same time when the angels are messengers of a good and moral God. The angels are commanding him to do an evil and immoral act. His mind cannot hold both ideas at once without shattering, so he must find a way to reconcile them. The only way is to reframe the evil act as being, somehow, good. It is a holy trial, a necessary sacrifice. He has to convince himself that this abhorrent command is actually an expression of a higher, divine logic that his mortal mind cannot grasp. For weeks, the battle rages within him. The house is filled with a terrible, silent tension. Jane is weeping. Kelley is sullen and impatient. And Dee is a ghost, wrestling with his conscience, his God, and his own identity. He is a man standing on a cliff edge. And the voices he has trusted for 7 years are telling him that the only way to salvation is to jump. Slowly, agonizingly, he is being worn down. The will to resist is beginning to crumble. The relentless psychological pressure, applied over weeks, finally wears down John Dee's resistance. The final decision is made not in a moment of spiritual clarity, but in a state of exhaustive, desperate submission. It's a surrender. The scene is set for one of the strangest and most uncomfortable events in the history of English scholarship. On May 3, young Batsy, the four of them, John Dee, his wife Jane, Edward Kelley, and his wife Joan, gather together. Dee has prepared a formal document, a written covenant. He's a man who has lived his life by the book, and even in this moment of profound moral crisis, he reverts to what he knows an egalistic formality. You are there as he reads this document aloud. It's a testament to his tortured state of mind. The text is a bizarre mixture of legal jargon, pious prayer, and self-justification. It begins by affirming their love for God and their commitment to the holy work. It then recounts the angelic command in all its starkness. It states that they are undertaking this act not out of carnal lust or filthy affection, but out of pure obedience to God's will, as a seal of our common love and friendship. He is trying to wrap this sordid, transgressive act in the language of a holy sacrament. He is creating a paper trail to God, a document he can present at the final judgment to prove he was only following orders. What about the others? Kelley, having gotten what he wanted, is likely somber and self-righteous, playing the role of the humble prophet who must see God's will done. Joan Kelley's feelings are, as always, unrecorded. She is a cipher in this drama, her compliance taken for granted by the men. The real drama lies with Jane Dee. Her consent is the final, crucial piece. According to Dee's own diary, her agreement was secured only at the last possible moment. He writes that she finally consented with great grief, weeping, and trembling. What could have possibly made her agree? Was it sheer exhaustion? Was it fear of her husband's spiritual torment? Or was it the ultimate act of wifely duty in an era when a wife's will was legally unsocially subordinate to her husband's? Some feminist historians have characterized this moment as an act of spiritual coercion and abuse, arguing that Jane had no real choice. To refuse would be to defy not only her husband but also his God. She was trapped. This brings us to a crucial, and often overlooked, historical detail. In the written covenant, Dee includes a clause that is both pathetic and revealing. It stipulates that if any children are born as a result of this cross-matching, they will be considered the legal and spiritual children of the entire group, to be raised in common in their holy work. He is already thinking about the consequences, trying to create a legal and theological framework for the potential fallout of this act. It shows that he understood the reality of what they were about to do, even as he was cloaking it in mystical language. The signing of the covenant is a profoundly awkward and somber ceremony. The four of them kneel together in prayer. They ask God for forgiveness if they have misunderstood his will, and for strength if they are doing right. Then, John Dee and Edward Kelley formally sign the document. Underneath their names, Jane Dee and Joan Kelley add their marks. The pact is sealed. The historical debate around this document is fascinating. Is it proof of a shared delusion, a folia quater, or is it evidence of a master manipulator? Kelley, successfully bringing his long con to its ultimate conclusion, most modern scholars lean toward the latter. They see the covenant not as a holy pact, but as the culmination of a long and cruel psychological game. Kelley had successfully used his own piety and intellectual pride as a weapon against him, forcing him to betray his own deepest values in the name of faith. But there's a more radical, though less accepted, interpretation. Some who study the occult tradition see this not as a sordid personal drama, but as a genuine, if terrifying, magical act. In this view, certain forms of sex magic involve the deliberate breaking of taboos to release power and achieve a higher state of consciousness. They argue that the angels were pushing Dee and Kelley to a point of ultimate transgression to shatter their egos and open a final magical gateway. This is not a mainstream academic view, of course, but it highlights how the story can be interpreted in wildly different ways depending on one's worldview. As the ink dries on the parchment, the line has been crossed. There is no going back. The intellectual partnership has now become a physical one. The search for divine knowledge has led them to this small room in Bohemia, where they have formally agreed to shatter the bonds of their own marriages in the name of angelic command. The trust, the respect, the shared intellectual dream that started their journey together, all of it has been sacrificed. The stage is set for the act itself, and its inevitable, disastrous aftermath. The covenant is signed. The prayers are said. What follows is shrouded in the delicate and pained language of Dee's diary. He does not provide a graphic description, but the fact and the event is recorded. The forbidden act, the cross-matching, takes place. The morning after is not one of spiritual ecstasy or divine revelation. There is no chorus of angels, no sense of a holy barrier having been broken through. The house in Treban is filled with a thick, suffocating silence. You can feel the change in the air. It's a toxic cocktail of shame, resentment, and profound, irreparable awkwardness. This is the moment the fantasy collides with brute reality. For months, the wife swapping had been a theological concept, a spiritual trial to be debated and agonized over. No, it is a memory, a stark, physical fact, and it has solved nothing. It has only shattered the fragile peace of the two families. Let's focus on the four individuals. For John Dee, the experience is a catastrophe. He had hoped for a sign, a confirmation that his terrible sacrifice had pleased God. He receives nothing, just the cold, grim reality of his transgression. He has betrayed his own moral code, coerced his wife, and for what the heavens are silent. The guilt must have been crushing. He has committed a mortal sin, and the promised spiritual reward has not materialized. For Kelley, the moment is likely one of hollow triumph. He has gotten what he wanted. He has either satisfied a personal lust or he has successfully engineered the crisis that will allow him to break from Dee. But even for a man as cynical as Kelley, the act must have had consequences. He has violated a deep social taboo and has done so with the wife of a man who, for all their arguments, had been his protector and benefactor for 7 years. Whatever satisfaction he felt was likely mingled with a new level of self-loathing. And what of the women? This is where the true tragedy lies. For Jane Dee, the morning after must have been a living hell. She was a devout woman who had been forced, by a combination of wifely duty and spiritual blackmail, to sleep with a man she detested. The sense of violation and shame is unimaginable. Her relationship with her husband, John, is forever changed. The trust at the heart of their marriage has been incinerated. How could she ever look at him the same way again? For John Kelley, her experience is lost to history, but we can imagine her resentment. Was she a willing participant? Or was she, like Jane, a pawn in her husband's game? Either way, the act cements the dysfunction of her own marriage and deepens the enmity between the two households. This is where the historical debate becomes less about interpretation and more about consequences. What did the Angelic sex pact actually achieve? It achieved the complete and total collapse of trust between all four people. It was the emotional and psychological bond that Kelley, whether consciously or not, had been building for months. Here's a small but devastating detail from Dee's diary that shows the immediate fallout. Just 9 days after the pact was fulfilled, Jane Dee discovers that she is pregnant. The timing is ambiguous. The child could be John Dee's, or it could be Edward Kelley's. The abstract, legalistic clause they had put in their covenant about children of the pact is now a terrifying, immediate reality. The child, a boy who would be named Theodore Strabonius Dee, is born into a world of profound confusion about his own parentage. The paternity of this child has been a subject of historical speculation ever since. Was he Dee's son, or Kelley's? We will never know for sure. But the uncertainty itself was a lasting poison introduced into the heart of the Dee family. The atmosphere in the house becomes unbearable. The scrying sessions, which were the entire reason for their partnership, cease almost completely. How could Dee and Kelley sit at the holy table together after what had happened? The intimacy of their shared spiritual quest has been replaced by a new intimacy, one of shame and mutual resentment. The magic is gone. The angels fall silent, their work of destruction complete. The shared delusion, the folie à deux that had sustained them for 7 years, cannot survive this. A fantasy can endure almost anything except the harsh light of physical reality. The act that was supposed to cement their holy union has, in fact, exposed the entire enterprise as a hollow, destructive fraud. The partnership is now a dead thing, a corpse waiting for a burial. All that's left is to decide who gets to walk away, and who gets left with the ruins. The aftermath of the wife-swapping pact is not a sudden explosion, but a slow, agonizing decay. The house in Trebon, once a hive of alchemical and spiritual activity, is now a cold, quiet place, thick with unspoken resentment. The four people at the heart of our story are like strangers, orbiting each other in a universe of shame and regret. The great Angelic project is over. All that remains is the divorce. The final break doesn't come from a scrying session. It comes from a simple, worldly argument. Kelley, having achieved his strategic goal of making the situation untenable, announces his definitive decision. He is leaving. He will accept the very generous offer from Emperor Rudolph II and go to Prague to serve as his personal alchemist. This time, there is no pleading from Dee. There are no desperate attempts to consult the angels. The spell is broken. Dee is a man who has been pushed too far, who has sacrificed his dignity, his morality, and his wife's honor, all for nothing. The anger that he has suppressed for years finally erupts. You can imagine the scene, recorded in Dee's diary. It's a bitter, ugly confrontation. Dee accuses Kelley of being a charlatan, a deceiver, a man without honor. He brings up all the failed prophecies, the manipulative messages, the years of financial dependence. He essentially accuses Kelley of having orchestrated the entire wife-swapping episode as a cruel trick. Kelley, for his part, fires back. He accuses Dee of being a foolish, naive old man. He claims that he was the real talent all along, the one with the genuine power, and that Dee was just a scribe, riding on his coattails. He may have even thrown the alchemical successes in Dee's face, contrasting his tangible gold with Dee's pages and pages of useless angelic chatter. It's the final, venomous searing of all the grievances that have been festering for 7 years. And then comes the final act of their partnership. They have to divide the assets. This is a bizarre and tragic moment. They get out the alchemical equipment and the supposed philosophers stone the red powder. Dee, who has been the senior partner and financier of the entire operation, naturally expects a significant share, but Kelley has other ideas. This brings us to a crucial, and somewhat pathetic, historical detail. According to Dee's account, they take the precious powder and divide it. But Kelley, in a final act of petty dominance, uses a rigged scale or some other trick to ensure he gets the vastly larger portion. He also takes the best of the alchemical equipment, He is stripping the Enterprise of all its worldly goods before he departs, leaving Dee with little more than his books and his voluminous, now worthless, Angelic diaries. The historical debate here focuses on the nature of this final separation. Was it an acrimonious but essentially mutual parting of ways, or should it be seen as Kelley, the con artist, completing his final score? Most historians lean towards the latter. Kelley arrived at Dee's door 7 years earlier with nothing but a criminal record and a silver tongue. He leaves as Sir Edward Kelley, a man of fame and reputation, with a generous imperial contract waiting for him and his pockets full of alchemical gold. Dee, on the other hand, started as one of the most respected scholars in Europe. He's left a broken man, stranded in Bohemia, his reputation in tatters and his family life shattered. From a purely material standpoint, there is no question who won and who lost. They perform one last, formal act together. They take the scrying stone, the obsidian mirror that had been the portal for all their revelations and all their misery. They break it in two. It's a symbolic act, the definitive shattering of their magical union. Each man takes a piece. It's a final, bitter souvenir of their long, strange journey. Then, Kelley leaves. He packs up his wife, his new title, and his ill-gotten gains, and heads for the glamour and danger of the imperial court in Prague. Dee is left alone in Trebon with his family. The silence in the house must have been deafening. The prophet is gone. The voice of the angels is silent. He is surrounded by the wreckage of his life's great project. He has thousands of pages of meticulous notes, an entire system of angelic magic, a language from heaven, and it has all led to this. Humiliation, betrayal, and annoying, terrible suspicion that it was all lie. The long, intense, codependent partnership between the Queen Sorcerer and the criminal seer is finally, irrevocably, over. Our story now splits into two, and we follow Edward Kelley on his victory lap, which will soon turn into a tragic spiral. He arrives in Prague not as a disgraced necromancer, but as a celebrated scientific genius. Emperor Rudolf II welcomes him with open arms. He is given the title of knight or baron, granted several estates, and installed in a grand house with a state-of-the-art laboratory. For the boy from Worcester with the cropped ears, this is the absolute pinnacle of success. He is living the dream. He is rich, famous, and respected. He is a major figure at the most eccentric and magical court in Europe. He no longer needs John Dee. He is his own man, the Emperor's personal alchemist, the one who holds the secret to infinite wealth. But there's a problem. The Emperor isn't just a patron, HES, an employer, and he expects a return on his investment. The parties and the grand titles are all very well, but Rudolf wants gold, lots of it. He wants Kelley to start mass production, to fill the imperial treasury. The pressure on Kelley is now immense, far greater than it ever was with Dee Rosenberg. He is no longer just performing for an enthusiastic amateur, he is on contract to a powerful and deeply unstable monarch. And it seems that Kelley's magic begins to fail him. His supply of the original reed powder, the one he used for his most convincing demonstrations, starts to run low. His attempts to create more of it, to replicate the Philosopher's Stone from scratch, are all failing. He can talk the talk, but he can no longer produce the goods on demand. This is a key historical point. Kelley's success was built on a finite resource, either a chemical trick he couldn't easily repeat or a limited supply of his projection powder. Once that was gone, he was exposed. The Emperor, a man not known for his patience, begins to grow suspicious. His alchemist is making a lot of excuses. The experiments are always on the verge of success, but never quite get there. Rudolf starts to feel that he has been duped. His favor, which had elevated Kelley to such great heights, begins to curdle into resentment. And here's a quirky and telling detail about Kelley's time in Prague. He started to drink heavily. He was known for his lavish, drunken parties and his violent temper. He got into a duel with a court official and killed him. For a commoner, this would have meant certain execution. But Kelley, as the Emperor's pet alchemist, was protected. However, The incident severely damaged his reputation and further eroded the emperor's trust. He was becoming a liability. The end comes swiftly. In 1591, the emperor's patience finally runs out. Convinced that Kelley is a fraud who is either unable or unwilling to reveal the secret of transmutation, Rudolph has him arrested. The great Sir Edward Kelley is stripped of his titles and thrown into prison at Kelley Castle, just outside Prague. The historical debate here concerns the reason for his imprisonment. Was it simply because he failed to produce gold, or was it more political? Some historians suggest that Kelley knew too much. He had been a confidant to the emperor and other powerful figures. Perhaps he had become a political threat, and the charge of being a fraudulent alchemist was just a convenient excuse to get rid of him. Others believed that Elizabethan government in England, hearing of his fame and his supposed ability to create gold, was trying to lure him back, and Rudolph imprisoned him to prevent him from taking his secrets to a rival power. Whatever the reason, his fall is as dramatic as his rise. He, the man who claimed to speak with angels and hold the key to the universe, is now a common prisoner. He tries to regain the emperor's favor from his cell, writing desperate letters promising that he is on the verge of a breakthrough, but it's too late. After a couple of years in prison, he attempts a daring escape. He ties bed sheets together to make a rope and tries to climb down from a tall window, but the makeshift rope breaks. He falls, severely breaking his leg. The injury becomes infected. He is recaptured and moved to another prison at Nevin Castle in Most. There, his situation is hopeless. He is in constant pain from his injuries. His reputation is destroyed, and his patron has abandoned him. In 1597, at the age of 42, Edward Kelley dies in prison. The circumstances of his death are murky. The official story is that he died from his injuries, but another, more persistent legend claims that he took his own life by swallowing poison. A final act of defiance from a man who had run out of tricks. And so ends the incredible, improbable life of Edward Kelley, the forger who became a prophet, the prophet who became an alchemist, and the alchemist who became a baron, dies a broken prisoner. His life was a whirlwind of deception, ambition, and perhaps moments of genuine self-delusion. He had flown closer to the sun than anyone could have imagined. But, in the end, the fall was inevitable and absolute. While Kelley is riding his roller coaster of fame and disaster in Prague, we turn our attention back to the lonely, quiet figure of Dr. Ive, John Dee, left behind in Trebon. The departure of his toxic partner is a relief, but it's also a profound crisis. For 7 years, his entire life had revolved around the actions, the angelic conversations. Now, the line is dead. The voice is gone. All he has is the silence, the shame, and the mountain of incomprehensible notes. He stays on in Trebon for a while, under the continued, if now somewhat cooler, patronage of Willem of Rosenberg. He tries to continue the work on his own. He prays. He studies his notes. He even tries to scribe for himself, hoping that the angels will now speak directly to him, their faithful servant. But it's no use. The magic, it seems, left with Kelley. This period is one of deep introspection and sorrow for Dee. He must be wrestling with the terrible question, was it all a lie? He never fully admits it in his diaries, at least not in explicit terms. To do so would be to negate the most significant chapter of his life. Instead, he seems to settle on a more comforting narrative. The mission was genuine and the early angelic messages were real. But at some point, the project was hijacked by evil spirits, or Kelley himself became corrupted and began faking the messages. This allows him to preserve the sanctity of the initial quest while explaining its disastrous end. In 1589, after nearly 6 years on the continent, he receives word from England. Queen Elizabeth, perhaps hearing of his plight or simply wanting her brilliant navigator back, sends a friendly summons for him to return home. For Dee, it's a lifeline. He is now over 60 years old. Weary of his long exile, he longs for his home, his country, and his library. he packs up his family, his few remaining possessions, and his precious, voluminous diaries, and begins the long journey back to England. You can imagine his state of mind. It's not the triumphant return of a magus who has discovered the secrets of the universe. It is the quiet, shuffling return of an old man who has failed. He arrives back in Mortlake to a scene of devastation. This is a genuinely tragic and well-documented moment. During his long absence, his home has been ransacked, his magnificent library, his life's work, the greatest private collection in England, has been plundered. Neighbors and former associates, likely believing the rumors that he was a wicked sorcerer who had fled into exile, broke in and helped themselves. This is a devastatingly cruel little detail of history. Hundreds of his priceless books and manuscripts were stolen, his scientific instruments the astrolabers. The quadrants were smashed. The mob had torn apart the heart of his scholarly life. He would spend years trying to track down and recover his stolen books, but much of his library was lost forever. It was a physical manifestation of what had happened to his reputation. The tangible knowledge he had collected was scattered, just as his name had been sullied by rumor and scandal. He seeks an audience with the Queen. She receives him kindly, but the old intimacy is gone. He is no longer the indispensable advisor at the center of power. He is a relic from another time, a man associated with strange and questionable pursuits. He spends years petitioning the crown for a pension or a new position, something to support him in his old age. He writes long, defensive tracts, trying to clear his name and explain the true, holy nature of his spiritual quest, but few are listening. The historical debate here centers on why he was so thoroughly marginalized. Was it simply because of his association with the now notorious Kelley, or had the intellectual climate in England shifted during his absence? Some historians argue that the age of the Renaissance magus was coming to a close. A new, more empirical, and less mystical form of science was on the rise. Too, with his blend of mathematics and angelology, was beginning to look like a relic of a superstitious past. He was a man out of time. Eventually, the Queen takes pity on him and grants him a minor wardenship at Christ's College in Manchester. It's a form of honourable retirement, but it's a far cry from his former glory. He moves there, but he is unhappy. The academic community is suspicious of him, and he is seen as an eccentric old sorcerer. He spends his final years in relative poverty and obscurity, poring over his old diaries, trying to make sense of the angelic messages, forever wrestling with the legacy of his partnership with Edward Kelley, the man who had advised explorers, who had coined the term British Empire, and who had conversed with angels. Dies in 1608 or 1609, a quiet and largely forgotten figure. His grand dream of creating a new heaven on earth had ended here, in poverty and whispers, a cautionary tale of what can happen when the hunger for forbidden knowledge becomes all-consuming. With Dee in his quiet, obscure retirement and Kelley dead in a Bohemian prison, what becomes of their incredible, secret work? What is the fate of the Holy Table, the wax seals, and most importantly, the massive collection of angelic diaries for years? This monumental, bizarre archive simply disappears from history. You follow the trail of the document. After Dee's death, his surviving son, Arthur Dee, the same son he had once tried to use as a esquire as a boy, inherits his father's possessions. Arthur, who became a physician himself and even served the Tsar in Russia, takes the diaries with him. They are a strange inheritance, a detailed record of his father's magnificent obsession and the memory of the strange man, Kelley, who had so thoroughly dominated and ultimately shattered their family life. For decades, the diaries, these handwritten records of angelic conversations in a secret language, lie hidden. They are kept in a chest, a private family legacy that is too strange and perhaps too dangerous to reveal to the world. Then comes one of the most remarkable and almost unbelievable details in the story of their survival. The diaries eventually find their way into the hands of a 17th century antiquarian and collector named Robert Cotton. Cotton had a legendary library of his own, which would later become the foundation of the British Library. He understood the importance of these papers. But then, disaster strikes. In 1731, a massive fire sweeps through Ashburnham House, where Cotton's library was stored. It's a cultural catastrophe, destroying countless irreplaceable medieval manuscripts. These diaries are in that fire. You can imagine them, pages filled with Enochian script and these frantic scribbles, curling and blackening at the edges. It seems that the secret of the angels is about to be turned to ash. Lost forever. But through a stroke of incredible luck, the volumes containing these spiritual diaries are rescued from the flames. They are charred, water damaged, and singed around the edges, but they survive. You can still see the burn marks on the pages today in the British Library. It's as if the documents themselves had to pass through a final trial by fire to reach posterity. It is only after this, in the late 17th and early 18th centuries, that scholars begin to seriously study the diaries. A man named Merrick Cussabon publishes a large portion of them in 1659 under the title A True Faithful Relation of what passed for many years between Drive, John Dee, and some spirits. But Cussabon's intention is not to celebrate Dee. He publishes the diaries as a cautionary tale, to prove that Dee was a deluded fool who had been tricked by evil spirits. He presents the work as evidence of the dangers of spiritual enthusiasm. For centuries, this is the dominant view. Dee is remembered not as a great scientist, but as a credulous old man, a sorcerer who got played. Kelley is seen as the villain, the demonic trickster. The Enochian language and the complex system of magic are dismissed as gibberish, the elaborate props of a long con. But then, in the late 19th century, something strange happens. The story takes another turn. A new group of English mystics, a secret society called the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, rediscovers these diaries, and they don't see them as a cautionary tale. They see them as a genuine, powerful, and unfinished system of magic. This is a major historical point. The Enochian system was resurrected. The Golden Dawn, which included famous figures like the poet W.B. Yeats and the infamous occultist Aleister Crowley, took these raw material, the Enochian language, the 48 angelic keys, the diagrams of the spiritual realms, and they systemated it. They filled in the gaps, developed new rituals, and turned it into a workable, if highly complex, magical practice. The historical controversy here is about the legitimacy of this revival. Are modern practitioners of Enochian magic actually tapping into the same forces as Dee and Kelley, or are they simply engaging in a form of elaborate role-playing? Based on the fabrications of a 16th century, common academic historians would firmly argue for the latter. They see the Golden Dawn's work as a modern invention, a romantic reconstruction that has little to do with the historical reality of what happened in Mortlake and Bohemia. Practitioners, on the other hand, argue that the system has an internal consistency and a psychological power that can't be so easily dismissed. They believe Dee and Kelley, for all their personal flaws, genuinely stumbled upon something real. Aleister Crowley, in particular, was fascinated by the system. He traveled to the Algerian desert to recite the Enochian calls and claimed to have spectacular and terrifying visions. Traveling through the spiritual left wild west that Dee and Kelley had first mapped out. So the legacy of the magic books is twofold. In the academic world, they are a priceless historical source, a window into the mind of the Renaissance, the strange twilight world where science and magic dance together. They are a case study in psychology, in belief, in fraud, and in desperation. But in the esoteric underworld, the books are not history, they are living grimoires, textbooks for a system of magic that is still being practiced today. The language Kelley supposedly invented on the fly is being chanted in secret temples and private rituals around the world. The angels who fell silent after the Pact and Tribunal. Some believe, speaking again, the work that was born in Dee's quiet oratory has had a long, strange, and fiery afterlife that he could never have possibly imagined. And so, we come to the end of our journey. We are back where we started, in a quiet, darkened room, contemplating a story that has spanned decades and crossed a continent. Let's take one last look at that strange, captivating object that sits at the heart of it all, the black obsidian mirror. It rests now behind glass in a museum. A silent, polished disk of volcanic rock. It has outlasted all of them. It saw the hope and desperation in John Dee's eyes. It reflected the cunning, performing face of Edward Kelley. It witnessed the prophecies of kingdoms, the dictation of a secret language, and the command that shattered for lives. What do we see when we look into it now? We see the reflection of a story about the collision of genius and fraud, faith and deception. Who was the real victim here? The most obvious answer is John Dee, the brilliant scholar led to ruin by a charismatic charlatan. He lost his reputation, his fortune, and the peace of his family. And of course, we see the silent, profound victimhood of Jane Dee, a woman forced to endure the unimaginable in the name of a faith she did not share. But was Kelley a victim too? In a more complex way, a victim of his own lies. He built a prison of deception for himself, one that he could never escape. His desperate need for fame and wealth led him to a real prison, and a lonely, painful death. He gained the whole world for a moment, but in the process, he became a hollow man, a character in a play that he could no longer control. The story is a perfect illustration of the great intellectual shift happening in the 16th and 17th centuries. John Dee stands with one foot in the old world of magic, mysticism, and divine revelation, and one foot in the new world of mathematics, exploration, and empirical science. He was a man caught between two ages, and the tension tore him apart. He tried to apply the rigorous, systematic methods of science to the unpredictable, chaotic world of spirits, and the result was a catastrophe. And what about the central mystery, the angels? Were they real? Were they demons? Were they psychological projections? Or were they nothing more than the masterful improvisations of a gifted con artist? The historical consensus, of course, lands firmly on the side of fraud. Kelley, the argument goes, was a classic cold reader, a brilliant opportunist who saw a desperate man and told him exactly what he wanted to hear. The Enochian language was glossolalia filtered through an English grammatical structure. The prophecies were tailored to the ambitions of their audience. The alchemical transmutation network clever chemical tricks. And yet, the story resists such a simple, tidy explanation. This is where we come to our final academics are still debating point. A question that lingers long after the facts have been settled, even if Kelley faked it all. How did he do it? How did a man with a limited education and a criminal background create, on the sly, a system of such staggering complexity, the sheer volume of the material, the thousands of pages of text, the unique alphabet, the intricate cosmic maps? The poetry of the angelic keys is astounding. If it was all a hoax, it was a hoax of such genius, such sustained creative energy, that it almost circles back around to being a kind of miracle in itself. It's this lingering what if that gives the story its power. What if they did touch something? What if, in their strange, toxic, codependent ritual, they opened a door just a crack? What if the voices Kelley channeled were not from heaven or hell, but from the deep, unexplored wilderness of the human mind itself? The story of Dee and Kelley is a testament to the incredible power of belief, for good and for ill. It shows how the desperate desire to believe can make a genius blind, and how it can empower a fraud to create something far greater and more enduring than he ever intended. The obsidian mirror reflects only us now, our own faces, our own modern, rational world. But for a moment, if you look closely, you can almost see the faint, ghostly images of the two men who staked everything on what they saw within it. A white-bearded scholar, filled with a holy, heartbreaking longing, and a sharp-eyed trickster with cropped ears and a universe of lies on his tongue. They are bound together forever in that dark glass, a timeless portrait of faith and its shadow. The journey is over. The frantic scratching of Dee's quill has finally ceased, and the strange, guttural sounds of the angelic language have faded into the long silence of the centuries. The house in Trebon is quiet now. The air cleared of its heavy charge of hope and shame. The dust of 400 years has settled gently over the whole affair, softening the sharp edges of the betrayal, muting the cries of anguish. You can feel the story beginning to recede, to drift away from the hard facts of history and into the softer, more forgiving realm of legend. It becomes less about specific dates and recorded deeds, and more like a dream you are slowly waking from. The faces of the players begin to blur. John Desermis, Thurmdell, Kelley's restless, calculating eyes, Jane's quiet, sorrowful resilience. They dissolve back into the great tapestry of the past. Their intense, passionate drama just one thread among millions. And as they fade, perhaps you can feel yourself beginning to drift as well. Let the rhythm of the narrative slow down. Let the details melt away. All that matters now is the gentle, lulling sense of distance, the feeling of floating backwards, away from the 16th century, away from its conflicts and its clamor. Let the silence of these final, lonely years and mortlake be a comforting blanket. The struggle is over. The striving has ended. There is only peace now. The kind of deep, quiet peace that comes after a long and turbulent story has finally found its end. The mirror is dark. The book is closed, and the world is asleep. The end of the article. Good night.